Councillors in the gallery, if you could take your seats too, please. Councillors and visitors, please remember to switch your electronic devices to silence. Welcome everybody. I'd also like to welcome our viewers at home who are watching the meeting via the live stream. Before we get started this evening, in line with state government restrictions, it remains mandatory for everyone to have signed in using the Safer WA QR code or the hard copy register. We'll now move on with the meeting. If I could ask you all please to stand. And Deputy Mayor Bianca Sandri, could you please read out the opening prayer?
Almighty God, we ask you to guide us in all our discussions to show goodness, honesty, understanding and wisdom in all that we undertake to do. May we respect each other's views at all times, and we ask all of this in your name.
Amen. And could I ask Councillor Perkoff if you could please read the acknowledgement of country?
On behalf of councillors, we would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, on which this meeting is taking place, and show our respect for elders past, present and emerging.
Thank you. You can take your seats. Thanks. Please note that without prior approval, any recording of this meeting is prohibited, and members of the public should note that no action should be taken on any resolution of council prior to written advice from the council being received. Now takes me to item 1, which is the official opening. Ladies and gentlemen, I now declare the council meeting of the 16th of March 2021 open at 7 p.m. Item 2, attendance and apologies. I have nil. Item 3, approved leave of absence. Councillor David Boothman granted a leave of absence for the period 16th of March 2021 to 18th of March 2021 inclusive. Disclosure of interest. From the Audit Committee of 22nd of February 21, I have nil. From the Planning and Development Committee of 9th of March 21, I have nil. Today we have item 13.1. The CEO, Stuart Jardine, has put a financial disclosure as a matter is related to his employment contract. Councillors, are there any other indications? Councillor Caddy.
Yes, please. 13.3, the appointment of alternative representative to the committee for Perth. As I'm the subject of the report, I've got an impartial.
Thank you. Councillor Sandri.
Thank you. Item 17 is an impartial, as I recently sat on a panel discussion in my professional capacity whereby the owner of Momentum Wealth also was a panellist. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other indications? No. Takes us to item 5, petitions. I have nil. Councillors, do you have any unverified petitions you would like to present this evening? Item 6, responses to previous questions from members of the public taken on notice. All questions from the previous council meeting were published in the minutes of that meeting. Takes us to item 7, which is public question time. We'll now move on to public question time. To enable all questions to be asked and responded to without the need for multiple extensions of time, could I please request a mover and a seconder for the following motion that in accordance with clause 5.712 of the City of Stirling's Meeting Procedures Local Law 2009, public question time be extended for the time needed to respond to those questions from members of the public who have registered. Councillor Ree, Councillor Caddy seconded. Just go to the vote, please, councillors. That is unanimous. Thanks, councillors. All right, and the first person I'll ask up is Roy Burton. As you are walking up, Mr. Burton, I will just note there's obviously quite a few questions relating to the yellow agenda item this evening. If you could listen, please. I just noticed there's a lot of questions that are the same questions, so please listen. And obviously, with a lot of questions tonight taking time, if you could, if they're already answered, if you could refrain from asking that question again, that'd be appreciated. Mr. Burton, your name and suburb? Oh, just your microphone, sir, just on the bottom right-hand corner, the silver button.
All right, okay, done. My name is Roy Burton and I live with my wife Anne at 333 West Coast.
Just your suburb's fine, Mr. Burton.
Oh, okay. Our house is on the south side of the proposed development site, and our major concern is the excessive amount of overshadowing onto our property. My first question is, given that JDAP at the last JDAP meeting recognised overshadowing as a major problem and instructed the proponent to address it, why does the city's RAR still say that 47% overshadowing is perfectly all right?
Thank you. Mr. Rodich?
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thanks, Mr Burton, for the question. The city officers have assessed the overshadowing and are of the opinion that the building form and orientation of the development satisfies the element objectives of Volume 2 apartment codes.
My second question is Council aware that 47% overshadowing is 2.5 times greater than the 19.5% overshadowing which is allowed in the R codes, and the proponent has made no attempt to address the problem?
Mr Rodich?
Thanks for the question, Mr Burton. Yes, we're aware of the variation proposed.
My third question is, will Council now recognise that overshadowing is a major problem and add overshadowing as another reason for the recommendation that the proposal be rejected?
And thanks for that question, Mr Burton, and that item is on the agenda this evening and Council will certainly consider that.
Thank you. Leave that on?
Yes, thank you. Melanie, sorry, I'm not sure, is it Melanie Elliott?
It was.
Sorry.
It was Melanie Elliott. It's Melanie Home. I live in Gwelup, but I grew up in Madam Street, Trigg. So is the council satisfied that if the development goes ahead, the residents of Trigg will have to live with the long-term consequences of this huge building being a blight on coastal ambience of its locality, both in terms of scale and appearance?
Yes.
Does the council believe that this RAR clearly expresses sound reasons for the JDAP to refuse the application based on scale and appearance?
And that item is on the agenda this evening and Council will consider that.
Thank you. Why has the RAR report not included specific reference to the excessive shadowing and non-compliance with the LPP 4.2 as reason for JDAP to refuse the application?
Okay. Mr Rodich?
Thanks, Mr Mayor, and thanks, Ms Home, for the question. The city's RAR addresses the reasons for deferral of the application at the last JDAP meeting. The officer's report also provides commentary in regards to Local Planning Policy 4.2, and that's contained within the Responsibility Authority report. The officers have carried out their assessment and have identified three key reasons for refusal.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anne Elliott? Thank you, and just your name and suburb, please.
Hi, I'm Anne Elliott and I live in Medham Street, Trigg. It was interesting to read the RAR, and this is my question. On page 19 of this RAR report, there is an excerpt from the Design Review Panel report stating the panel deliberated on the scale of built form of the applicant's design in a low-density residential zone and came to the conclusion that the development will be a positive contribution to its context. I do wonder if they visited the site. How is it that the Design Review Panel's opinion has taken precedence over public opinion and the city's development standards, which have been contravened in bulk height setbacks, overshadowing, and allows this application to proceed?
Thank you. Mr Rodich?
Thanks, Ms Elliott, for the question. The Design Review Panel's advice is one of the criteria we look at when we assess an application. We also take into consideration comments received during advertising, the applicant's submission, and of course the city's own officer's assessment.
Is that one person's assessment, or is that several, or is that your assessment? Sorry, extra question. Forgive me. Question 2. Ponder that one. Are you aware that in Trigg, no apartment building is more than 2 stories high? And we have a series of them going up Lynn Street or down Lynn Street. No house, according to the City of Stirling building licence or planning, is higher than 2 stories plus an undercroft, because we have them in our street. And the undercroft is similar to underground parking, if you want that defined. By comparison, this building will be 4 stories high and an undercroft. Is this not out of context with the locality and therefore a negative, not a positive contribution to its context?
And the simple answer is last time council considered it, they recommended it for refusal for these reasons. But that item is on the agenda this evening. Council will
Good,
consider
thank
it again.
you. And my last one, you may not want to, I may not ask it, but I did look at your values, which are transparent, respectful and inclusive. And I do wonder if you've all been transparent, okay? That's it.
Thank you. And I'm happy to answer that, Ms Elliott, because... Yes. And I think in context, to be fair, this report was brought as a late item to ensure, and all community members were notified so that council could have input to this RAR and ensure that it was in the public arena and it was transparent. So I think that question is a little unfair.
But unfortunately, we didn't have time.
It's not for debate, I'm sorry.
Sorry, okay.
I'm sorry.
We missed out on time.
No, we didn't have time either, but that's why we brought it as an urgent late item. Peter Pagnozzi, please. Pagnozzi, sorry. And I got this wrong last time too, and apologies.
Good evening. My name's Peter Pagnozzi and I live in Medham Street, Trig as well. My first question tonight is, how is the city planning to deal with traffic management and safety in the area due to a restaurant operation?
Mr Rodich?
Thanks, Mr Mayor, and thanks, Ms Pagnozzi, for the question. If the application does get approved, the city will need to consider the traffic impacts at that time on those local streets if there is actually a problem. The city's recommendation for the development is refused for a number of reasons, including the impact of traffic on the local area.
Second question, how is the city planning to deal with waste management associated with the restaurant operation, please?
Mr Rodich?
Through the Chair, and thanks for the question. If the application is approved and the city are requested to provide conditions of approval, one of those conditions will relate to the submission of a waste management plan. At that point in time, our waste team and our planning team, and as well as the environmental health team, will look through that plan and determine if that is appropriate or not. At this point in time, we have not been requested to provide any conditions of approval to the JDAP.
Okay. I think the confusion here tonight is that this has been going on for a year. We've had several meetings with JDAP. We keep asking the same questions. They've been asked to look at redesigning or fixing these questions I'm asking tonight. They've been given 12 months to do it and nothing's come to hand. So we get confused and frustrated as to why we're still waiting for an answer as to how they're going to deal with the traffic management and the waste management. My third question is, how is the city planning to deal with noise and smell in the area due to the restaurant operations?
Mr Rodich?
Thanks for the question, Ms Pagnozzi. Noise is governed by the Environmental Protection Noise Regulations, so the city would administer those. And in terms of, I think you said odour or smell, well, kitchens need to be fitted out and must comply with the Australian Food Standards Code. So those things we do check at, once, I guess, a commercial kitchen's up and running.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Andy Freeman? What's your name and suburb, thanks?
Andy Freeman, 29 Metten Street, Trig, next to the Pagnozzis. Two questions. My first one is, how can the city allow the proposed form, bulk and scale and overall intensity of this development to adversely affect our local amenity?
The city hasn't allowed it. The city isn't the decision maker in this, but that item will be considered tonight on the agenda.
Okay, thank you. And my second one, how will the city compensate us affected landowners impacted by the devaluation of all of our neighbouring properties, essentially sort of harvesting our land value and amenity and passing that over to a developer? That's a pretty big concern for all of us.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Mr Freeman. And the simple answer is the city won't compensate affected owners, but the city last time recommended this for refusal, and again, we'll consider this evening.
Okay, lean into it, guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Wayne Blakeney, please.
Good evening, Wayne Blakeney from Trig. As Council is very well aware, the Too Big for Trig local community group has been actively involved in the review of this proposal for almost 18 months now. I refer to the timeline that was set by JDAP at its meeting on the 9th of December, which provided 60 days for the developer to respond to various issues, followed by 30 days for the city to respond. Given that the developer provided its response on the 26th of February, 19 days late, my first question is, why is the community now being penalised in having to comment on the city's RAR with only effectively 4 working days' notice and provide intelligent feedback and meaningful commentary to JDAP, all submitted by this Friday, 9 a.m. 4 business days to review hundreds of pages of documents and then engage the services of our professional advisors is just not enough time.
Thank you. Mr Rodich?
Thanks, Mr Mayor, and thanks, Mr Blakely, for the question. The city is bound by the timeframe set by the Joint Development Assessment Panel, as well as a state administrative tribunal in this case. As you correctly pointed out, we were providing information on the 26th and we had to provide an RAR to the JDAP last week.
Disappointing that a developer gets 19 days or 18 days or whatever it was leeway and...
Thank you, Mr Blakely. I need a
Given that, would the city support a request for a 2-week deferral of the JDAP meeting to enable the community to make meaningful comment on the proposal?
Mr Rodich?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. That would be up to the Joint Development Assessment Panel to defer the application. The application is in their jurisdiction. Council are considering the RAR tonight. Council may consider that as an addition to the officer's recommendation, but in the end, Mr Blakely, it is up to the Joint Development Assessment Panel to determine whether or not they would give an extension. In saying that as well, there'd probably have to be some discussions with the State Administrative Tribunal because this is in a mediation session at the moment.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr Blakely, and the Council will take that into consideration with their discussions tonight.
Thank you. Just a third question, and I apologise at short notice, but at a previous JDAP meeting, the City presented a deputation via Councillor Karen Caddy outlining and reiterating the City's strong refusal of the then proposal. Would the City again be prepared to present a similar strong deputation at the upcoming JDAP meeting on Tuesday, given your comments to the review that's taking place this evening?
Sure. Thanks for that question, Mr Blakely, and that would be up to Council to make that as part of the decision tonight. And
thank you.
And I'm sure that, they will consider that. Rob Ding.
Is the microphone still on?
Yes, sir. Just your name and your suburb.
Thank you. Rob Ding, Kitchener Street, Trigg. Question 1. Does the City of Stirling believe, if approval is granted to the developers, that no trespass, brackets, harm, is going to follow? Every man and woman is equal under the law. To do wrong or harm equals trespass.
Thank you, Mr Ding, and I'll take that as a comment rather than a question. I can answer. I don't believe that the developer is going to do any harm. Your second question, sir?
Will City of Stirling be honourable and correct all trespass to date, plus remove all future openings for trespass, which could have the man/woman perpetrators facing claims, subjecting them to common law court action with jury of our peers seeking damages? A conviction by common law court cannot be appealed.
Mr Rodich.
Thanks, Mr Mayor, and thanks, Mr Ding, for your question, and thank you for providing it in writing before the meeting, because I probably wouldn't be able to answer it without that. As outlined above, the role of the City is to make recommendations and decisions on applications for planning approval. The common law of trespass is a private action between a landowner and another individual, and the City has no role in this.
Thank you. And your third question, sir?
Will City of Stirling be communicating to all stakeholders involved in the approval process, making it clear to all man/woman a duty of care is upon them to do no harm?
Thank you. Mr Rodich.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. The City undertakes consultation in relation to planning approvals as required and makes recommendations and decisions on applications for planning approval. The amenity impacts to the community are relevant considerations which are taken into account during this decision-making process.
Thank you, sir. Mark Spatori, please.
Mark Spatori, Madam Street. I refer to the intersection of Benyon Street and West Coast Drive, which happens to be the only street in the locality where you can turn north towards Sorrento. My question is, with the increased traffic resulting from a restaurant, what is the city planning to do to improve the situation and not make it worse than it currently is?
Mr Rodich.
Thanks, Mr Mayor, and thanks, Ms Spatori, for the question. I assume you're talking about the proposed restaurant and not the current restaurant. In terms of the proposed restaurant, if that application is supported, the city will consider any impacts on that local road network at that time when that development is up and running. At the moment, the city have recommended refusal of the application for a number of reasons, as I pointed out tonight: traffic, parking, similar kind of concerns what you may be raising in your question. And at this point in time, we have no plans to do anything until we find out what happens with the development next week, and then from that, when the development is constructed, if approved.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bo Lester. Thank you. Just name and suburb, thanks.
Yep, Bo Lester, excuse me, Madam Street, Trigg. How is the city going to manage parking in local streets for commercial staff, commercial customers and residential visitors?
Thank you. Mr Rodich.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Thanks, Mr Lester, for the question. As I've said a number of times tonight, we've recommended refusal of the application due to parking and traffic impacts should the development be approved, and should there be proven to be an impact on local streets and roads in terms of commercial staff, commercial customers and resident visitors. The city will need to consider what traffic mechanisms they can put in place to limit any impact on local residents. But that's something we need to consider in the future if the application is approved.
And the second question is, when will the city start to limit and police parking by cafe staff and their customers on both sides of the adjoining roads?
Thank you. Mr Rodich.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Currently at the moment, with the current yellow cafe, there's no intention for the city to limit any parking along those streets. If there's concerns raised from residents, it's something the city will consider at any point in time. We could look at time limits on the streets, not allowing parking on one side of the road. There are a number of mechanisms we can consider, but we need to consider that at an appropriate time or when concerns are raised with the city.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Miles Harmer, please.
I'm not here about Trigg.
Okay.
My questions relate to how
just your name and suburb to
sorry,
start.
Miles Harmer, Mount Lawley. My questions relate to how informed councillors were at a briefing given to some councillors on the 26th of August 2019. The briefing on the Hamer Park and Inglewood Oval project was attended by Councillor Migdale from Mount Lawley and Councillors Lagan and Sandry from Inglewood. It was also attended by Councillors Caddy, Proud and Italiano from outside the area. The city's put extensive documentation, that's masses of stuff here, on the city website supporting the decision to locate the Hamer Park Clubroom on Woodson Street. The local ward councillors had previously been directed to this information and had months to consider it. Were councillors from outside the area specifically presented or directed to this information before the briefing?
Thank you for that question, Mr Harmer, and we'll respond to you in writing.
I sent it in this morning. It's not a hard question. Anyway.
Oh, sorry, Mr Littleton. Sorry, Mr Harmer, I wasn't aware you sent that in.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. Look, all elected members had access to the same information and were fully briefed on the matter.
Your next question?
That's no. Okay. My next question relates to the briefing sheets produced to show that the concerns in the community were based on misperceptions, they say. Okay. Local councillors had been emailed detailed information addressing these concerns. Were councillors from outside the area given these briefing sheets before the briefing so that they had time to fully consider them, or were they given them at the meeting? So that's quite a specific question. Yeah.
Mr. Littleton?
Thank you, Mr. Harmer. I can only respond as I did to your first question. All elected members had access to the same information and were fully briefed on the matter.
So they weren't directed to them or given them. They had access to
Your third question, thanks.
Okay. Briefing sheet 5, that's this one here, addresses the concerns that alternative options were not considered. This briefing sheet 5 explains in considerable detail all the factors taken into consideration. It shows that the city considered alternative locations and narrowed down potential locations for inclusion in a feasibility assessment matrix. It explains why the North Street location was not included in this matrix and why the Woodson Street was the only location identified for the clubroom. Can the city justify why the summary of this sheet in the presentation, that's the briefing that I'm talking about, states that 6 options were considered and all but 2 dismissed? The conversation was then about the 2 locations. That's the Woodson Street and the North Street location. So why did it say 6 options were considered and all but 2 dismissed, when in fact the sheet shows that the city had dismissed all but the Woodson Street location and that the North Street location had not even made it to the final matrix of locations for consideration?
Mr. Littleton?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Essentially, the information that you provided is not correct. North Street remained an option throughout the process.
Thank you, Mr. Harmer.
It's not in
Mr. Harmer, please. I'm sorry, it's not up for debate. We're happy to provide a more detailed response in writing if you'd like.
Yes, please.
Ms. Bunker?
Alison Bunker, Mount Lawley. My questions relate to the decision included in the Moyle report, Concept Design, which was published on the city's website 30th of August 2019. The decision was that given the level of concern raised in response to the consultation undertaken in April, May and June, the Woodson Street location will not be progressed. At the last council meeting, my third question was whether this decision was taken before the briefing to councillors, at the briefing or after. The question was taken on notice and the answer we received did not answer the question. The answer was, the decision to adopt the final location for the Hamer Park Clubroom was made by the city's democratically elected council. It was done so after extensive community consultation. The decision was not easy. It required council to weigh up the various factors. To be clear, I'm not asking about the decision to adopt the final location. I'm asking specifically about the decision that the Woodson Street location will not be progressed, which was included in the report on the Moyle Pavilion published on the 30th of August. Was this decision to not progress the Woodson Street location made before the briefing, at the briefing, or after the briefing, in the 4 days before the report on the Moyle Pavilion concept designs was published?
Mr. Littleton?
Thank you, Worship. Look, the city's answer remains the same. The decision to not progress Woodson Street was made at the same time the final location was endorsed.
Thank you. My second question is, I need to know who provided the replies to my original question last week.
Mr. Littleton?
The city has prepared and provided the responses to your questions.
The city, thank you.
Thank you. Have you got a third question?
No.
Sarah Lawson?
Sarah Lawson, Bailey Street and Trigg. I won't go through my first question because I believe that's been asked already. But my second question was, in light of the overshadowing issues with the development, if the development is approved, how is the city planning to compensate the Burtons for the massive reduction in their amenity and hence the property value?
Thank you for that question, Ms Lawson. And look, it hasn't been approved at this stage and council will consider it this evening, but the city has no process to allow for compensation.
Thank you.
Michael Lawson.
Michael Lawson, Trigg. In 2016-17, the city spent tens of thousands of dollars fighting the legal battle with the current owner of Yellow. The city argued he was operating a restaurant and not a takeaway shop. If a restaurant, he should be shut down. The city correctly argued that insufficient parking in a mainly residential precinct, that the Dog Beach car park not be considered usable for patrons, as there's no, also there was no bus service to the area, and the site sits in an R20 precinct. Restaurants is sometimes a permitted use, however the site is small and already has a massive traffic and parking issue impacting the community. If the current takeaway shop struggles with the parking, how can the city justify their discretion for them adding to our problems with the proposed excessive residential component, an additional 7 apartments with virtually no commercial parking available and a potential doubling of deliveries?
Thank you. Mr Rodich.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Thanks, Mr Lawson, for the question. The city are not supporting the provision of car parking at all on the site. It's inadequate. It's insufficient for both the commercial tenancy and taking into consideration the residential apartments. City officers have recommended that the application be refused for similar reasons you've raised.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Nicholas Burton.
Nicholas Burton, Trigg. First question. The applicant's overshadowing diagram, DA11, in their proposal indicates that a potential solar array may be installed by the adjoining neighbour on their southern facing 30-degree pitched roof. Does the city believe this is an efficient and effective location for a solar array?
Mr Rodich.
Thanks for the question, Mr Burton. Absolutely not. But remember, that was the applicant's justification for the proposal.
Thank you. Second question. The objective of clause 6.3 of the city's local planning scheme, number 3, is to ensure that buildings over 12 metres in height do not have a detrimental impact on the amenity of adjoining sites. Does the city consider a loss of 35% luminance during winter months as a result of the excess overshadowing proposed by the development is not detrimental impact on the adjoining site?
Mr Rodich.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Mr Burton, the portion of the building over 12 metres in height does not impact the adjoining property in terms of overshadowing. It's those parts of the building which are under 12 metres, levels 2 and 3. Those, I guess, impacts have been considered by the officers. In terms of the element objectives of the ARCODES, we've considered where that overshadowing falls onto the adjoining property, how that impacts habitable rooms, outdoor living areas, the additional shadow cast by the development above the standard, shall we say, is largely over the roof, but it's not that portion of the building which is over 12 metres in height. That section of the building's well set in from that southern boundary.
When you say it's largely over the roof, is that at 12 noon on the 21st of June?
Sorry, sir. Can you just go to your third question, please?
The RAR states that in order to reduce overshadowing, increased setbacks to the second and third stories of the development would be required. As this statement goes to the heart of Design Guidance 3.2.3 of State Planning Policy 7.3 Volume 2, why is the excessive overshadowing not considered as a reason for rejecting the proposed development?
Mr Rodich.
Thanks, Mr Bursch, for the question. The comment in the report is absolute fact that if you increase the second and third floor, that will reduce the impact of overshadowing on that adjoining property. Notwithstanding that, the city must carry out the assessment in accordance with the element objectives of the ARCODES and consider those, as I've stated before. They talk about impact on habitable rooms, outdoor living areas. These these parts of the building are overshadowed, but in terms of where you go in excess of the shadow requirement, that is over the roof of the development. The comments in the RAR are there, they are fact. It's up for the Development Assessment Panel to consider. As we know, one of the reasons for deferral was to consider overshadowing. All the applicant provided was justification for the current overshadowing. It didn't change the plans, and that's why those comments in the report are there for the decision maker to consider.
Thank you.
Thank you for your questions. Messina Robinson.
Messina Robinson, Trig. First question is, does the city agree that the overshadowing of 333 West Coast Drive is a major issue that will prevent the owner, Mr Burton, of ever being able to obtain solar warmth in winter or install solar power panels on his roof, and shouldn't that be included in the reasons for refusal?
Mr Rodich.
Thanks, Mr Mayor, and thanks, Ms Robinson, for the question. Yes, the shadowing from this development will definitely impact on the future or provision of solar panels on the southern property. However, when you look at the R codes, you need to consider against those element objectives, and they actually talk about solar panels which are actually now on the site. I'm not saying that's a perfect scenario, but the city must consider that in accordance with the planning framework, and that's what it says. It doesn't say on the future opportunity to put solar panels on the property. I know that's not a very smart planning answer, but that is reality.
Okay, second question is, given the intensity of the proposed development, what is the city's opinion of the actual number of parking bays required or that the proposed development is short in providing?
Mr Rodich.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Ms Robinson, you've probably seen, well, you have seen in the RAR that we provide an alternative car parking scenario. In the officer's view, 11 bays are required for the commercial tenancy with a maximum of 3 staff. If you look at the site and the location of those bays within the basement, and if you took into consideration the bays off Benyon Street, my argument would be there'd be between 6 to 8 bays shortfall. If you consider those ones off Benyon Street as being okay, then there would be a 6 bay shortfall. If the decision maker didn't, it would be an 8 bay shortfall in that scenario we put up.
So that's not in your refusal reason, so?
Yeah, I think that forms part of the RAR report. The traffic management and the parking forms the main part of the refusal. Sorry, we'll just see if, I think the microphone's gone. Do you want to? Yeah, just try that again. Yes. No, I think we need it on for the recording, so we'll just get it sorted for you. I don't know if it's. That's right. I think we'll just get the staff to sort that out for you before you start. Sorry, we just need it for the recording so everyone can hear as well. Sorry about that. Thanks.
The city's report states that the proposed building does not comply with the building height requirements of its local planning policy 4.2 mixed-use design guidelines, nor is it consistent with the streetscape or its coastal height limit. So why are these non-compliances not included as reasons for refusal of the proposal?
Thank you. Mr Rodich.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Thanks, Ms Robinson, for the question. The city's RAR largely addresses the reasons for deferral, but the city's RAR does make comment in terms of local planning policy 4.2 and the consideration of, I guess, that policy and the objectives of that policy. In terms of clause 6.3 of the scheme, in terms of the coastal height limit, the officer's report has previously supported the height of this development, taking into consideration those matters which need to be considered under clause 6.3. Now we know as this development, as proposed, hasn't changed the built form at all. So we have considered LPP 4.2 as well as clause 6.3, but we don't find that these are relative reasons for refusal of the application as considered. Noting that also this has gone through a mediation process for some period of time, and that mediation process has been between the JDAP and the State Administrative Tribunal, where the city are there to provide technical advice, and we need to consider, I guess, those discussions and make our informed decision when we write the Responsible Authority report.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Jan Blakeney. Just your name and suburb. Thanks.
Benyon Street, Trig. I just have one question. The latest RAR report has calculated the commercial parking requirement as 11 bays. Does the city agree these 11 bays can't practically be provided in the card access basement or off the loading bay, resulting in a parking shortfall of 11 bays?
Thank you. Mr Rodich.
Through the Chair, yes, Ms Blakely, you cannot provide those 11 car bays in the configuration as proposed by this development.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bob Mitchell, please. Mr Mitchell.
Good evening, Mayor, councillors, council officers and fellow public. My name is Robert Mitchell from Karrinyup. Before I start, I'd like to have a point of order.
That's my job, Mr Mitchell.
Sorry?
That's my job to do point of orders.
All right, well, through you, I want this point of order in relation to a comment by a councillor to the media which was published.
No, so let's go. Mr Mitchell, we can do this another time. I'm happy to have a chat with you. I'm sorry, you can't do it in question time, Mr Mitchell.
I'd just like to mention...
No, I will not have you naming councillors when they aren't in a position to defend themselves. I'm asking you to move on with
this relates to the people behind me being insulted.
Mr Mitchell, please.
All right, okay. Okay, Mayor, did you get my email today?
Yes, and I responded.
You have? I haven't seen it.
Yes.
Yeah, so you've set a date for the electors' meeting?
Yes, May 17 from memory.
May?
Yes, Mr Mitchell.
Good God.
Let's get on with the questions.
Right, we'll get on to the question. Heavens above. Yes, my first question relates to the renewal of the market licence for the Karrinyup Rotary Club for the use of the car park adjacent to the council chamber next door. Yeah, it's now a good time to consider and offer parking for an annual fee to council employees. If they prefer not to pay an annual fee, take out, say, a $10 fee per week from their pay. If they are not agreeable, they can then make their own arrangements available to themselves on reliable trains and bus services. Ratepayers should not be responsible for the welfare of employees making their way to the address of their employment. The council informed and reasoned reply, please. Okay? And the other thing I would put to that...
I can give you my reply now, Mr Mitchell, if you'd like. And I've given you this reply before. I don't support that at all.
Well, you can tell me
We're not debating.
I just want to add to that. Please provide the date and the council meeting item where free parking was passed.
Thank you.
Okay?
Thank you. We'll respond to you in
You'll give
writing.
that to me in writing.
We'll respond to you in writing.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Mitchell.
Yeah. Some time ago, I wrote to the council administration that quite a number of small tree plantings had died. I note they were removed. Have the positions of the streets been noted and new plant replacement plantings been put in when next plantings commence?
Mr Littleton?
Hang on.
Is it?
Further to that, I have noticed bunding of these trees is done in a fashion that encourages the growth of grass around the peripheries. So in other words, what's happening is the guy's coming along and he's squirting it there, and it's feeding the couch grass. Yeah. Trees being robbed of water when watering is done. Could I make a suggestion? The council provide PVC bunds, encapsulated bases, and with the plantings, with wood chips and soil manure around the peripheries of trees to keep away the grass. Now, a classic example of that is between North Beach Road and Reed Highway. It is an absolute disgrace.
Thank you, Mr Mitchell. I'll get a response from Mr Littleton.
I'm not quite sure whether I'm game to respond.
And now,
let's get a response.
In relation to that question...
This is a very long question, Mr Mitchell. Can we get your response?
Wait a minute. People have had it here tonight. Don't give me that. Liaison with the developer. Trees. $40,000 is going to be set aside so that the council administration can talk to the developers about what they're doing about trees. Good God, what's going on here? It's just going to be $40,000 thrown there, and someone's going to waltz out in a car and have a look, and blah, blah, blah.
Mr Mitchell, that's a completely different item, and it was refused at committee, and that item is on the agenda this evening. But at the moment, the council or the committee recommended refusal.
I know.
Let's get your
3-5 against. Thank you very much.
Mr Mitchell, we can have this debate any time. You can call me any time. We can have this. If you want question time, wait for the answers, please.
Yeah, but I just raised that because I agree with what you did. Question 3.
Do you want an answer to the other question?
Yeah.
Mr Littleton.
Some time ago, Councillor Spagnolo, Councillors Ree and myself put forward looking at establishing a swimming pool, museum, performing arts, cultural centre in the precinct of the City of Stirling. And then Councillor Ree put up a motion which was carried. I believe $100,000 is being set aside to investigate these matters. As a matter of expediency, surely a site or sites have identified with all the planning having been done in establishing the City of Stirling, well, the Stirling City Centre. It's been going on for years. Now you're chucking another 100,000 at it. For example, maybe a site for the Performing Arts Cultural Centre could be placed next to the car park with an easement left for the future roads to the Carrinup Road from the Stevenson Highway Avenue, which is getting a new name. Oh, you can laugh. I don't care. You're just irrelevant.
Mr Mitchell, I will ask you to behave yourself, please.
I'm behaving myself.
Mr.
You
Mitchell,
tell him to behave himself.
Mr Mitchell.
Well, just to finish off, will the ratepayers and electors be maintained in touch with the developments of these things, with the administration, you know, investigating it with $100,000?
Yes, you will, Mr Mitchell.
Good. Thank you, Mayor.
I will ring you myself.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mr Wheeler, don't encourage him, please.
It's an act I can't follow, Mayor. Yes. I mean, that's totally unfair. Simon Wheeler, Scarborough. I only have one question, Mayor, and that's just if the planning department can give us an update on behalf. I'm asking on behalf of Carrinup residents responsible developments if you can give us an update on the progress of the city's responsible authority report, when it's likely to be presented to council, and have you had any more? Are you aware of any more requests for extensions from the developer?
Yep. Mr Roddick.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Thanks, Mr Wheeler, for the question. We've prepared the background to the Responsible Authority report. Currently, it is due to be considered by Council on the 30th of March. However, I do know that we will receive an extension of time in the next couple of days. We have received new information from the applicant, but they've got a number of matters that need to be further addressed. I expect that a report will be provided to council in May this year, but once I do get confirmation of that extension, I'm more than happy to put that in writing to you so you can pass it on to the Karrinyup Responsible Development Group.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wheeler. Leisha Jack. Thank you, Ms. Jack. Yep, if you just turn it back on.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Mayor and councillors and staff. My first two questions are regarding the finding planning incentives. CP1, finding planning incentives for developers to save existing trees. I just want to make the point that things are constantly changing. We live in a rapidly changing world. Climate's changing constantly. There's new information and studies coming out all the time about the devastating loss of urban tree canopy and the negative impacts of this deforestation on public health and well-being. So do you agree that market research and consultation with developers to try and find better ways to retain trees on development sites should be an ongoing process that, should be done every year and, requires funds?
Yes. Quite simply, yes, and that was the intent of the committee discussion that I heard last week.
Do you agree that given the size of the City of Stirling, the size of the budget and the seriousness of the urban tree canopy loss issue, that $40,000 in the swing of things is not a large sum of money? May I remind you that $250,000 was allocated to the promotion of the new swimming pool that was being constantly promoted on the news and in the newspapers with free publicity anyway. So $40,000 to get out and talk to developers, surely this isn't a large amount for such a serious issue, is it?
No, and that item is on the agenda this evening for council to consider. Again, I think the intent of the committee, when this discussion, there wasn't that the committee didn't think that there needed to be the consultation. It was about having extra funds when it could probably be done with inside resources.
Okay. As long as they've got enough money to do it.
Well, there's no problem with that, Ms. Jack.
Good. One of the most, also question 3, listening to everyone complaining, upset about what's happening on the coastline. Is the council aware that one of the most basic and long-standing principles of good planning along coastlines, waterways and rivers is to have low buildings along the shore? Going further back, they get higher. If we don't follow this principle of good planning, will Scarborough and Trigg coastline end up looking like a great big long column of continuous buildings that will resemble Japan's tsunami walls, which block out everyone's views from behind?
Well, Scarborough and Trigg are very different planning frameworks, but and Trigg, the zoning around Trigg certainly won't allow for that. And council's made it clear previously, and council will deliberate again on the Trigg site. And previously they've recommended a refusal for the application.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, I don't have anyone else. Is there anyone I've missed? If not, thank you everyone for your patience. I'll now move on to item 8, which is applications for leave of absence. Are there any requests tonight? Councillor Caddy?
Yeah, thank you. Can I have a leave of absence from the 26th of March through to the 10th of April, please?
Thank you. Councillor Migdale?
Thanks,
Sorry,
Mayor.
just before you go on, just to those members of the gallery, if you do want to hear the yellow debate, we will bring it forward so you don't have to wait till the end of the meeting. Yeah, so you don't have to leave if you... Sorry.
Can
Councillor
I
Migdale?
Sorry, Mr Mayor, can I have a leave of absence for next Tuesday, the 23rd, please?
Thank you. Is there any other indication? If not, I just need a mover and a seconder for those leaves of absence. Moved Councillor Ferrante, seconded Councillor Perkoff. If you just vote, councillors. Councillor Caddy, I just need you voting, if I can. Just Councillor Reid. Yep, thank you, and that is unanimous. Item 9, confirmation of minutes. Councillors, can I have a mover and a seconder to accept the council minutes of the 23rd of February 21? Move Councillor Migdale, seconded Councillor Spagnolo. If you can go to the vote, please, councillors. That is unanimous. Thanks, councillors. Announcements by the presiding member. Councillor Keith Sargent has an announcement regarding the City of Stirling being awarded the gold status as part of the Waterwise Councils program.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The City of Stirling award gold status is... Oh, you said all that. I'm very pleased to advise that the City of Stirling has been successful in achieving an annual re-endorsement as a Gold Waterwise Council for 2021 due to the water-sensitive initiatives implemented in 2019-20 and our commitment to submitting a new Waterwise Council action plan this year for the 21 to 26 period. The Waterwise Council program is facilitated by the Water Corporation and the Department of Water with the aim to build a cooperative working relationship with local governments to improve water use efficiency in local governments and their communities. Originally endorsed in 2016, the city's progressed to Gold Waterwise City status in 2017 and has successfully achieved Gold status re-endorsement every year since. Some of the city's gold standard initiatives include a benchmarking with the Water Sensitive Cities program, completion of an irrigation upgrade at the Hammersley Golf Course, flood mitigation incorporating water-sensitive urban design, a Waterwise Verge rebate scheme for residents which exceeds targets, 15,000 Waterwise plants distributed to 731 residents, an urban forest plan which directly influences the urban water cycle, and participation of 18 schools in our Living Green School program. It is great that the city's efforts saving water and leading by example are being officially recognised. I would like to take the opportunity to thank the Parks and Sustainability Business Unit for all their hard work throughout the years. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Sargent. And before we move on, if I could just briefly make an announcement, an unscripted one, but I think I'd like to welcome back Councillor Ree and Councillor Migdale back as councillors. And I would like to acknowledge they both put themselves out there in the public realm to run for public office, to Councillor Ree running in the upper house and Councillor Migdale in the lower house. I know it's a challenging political environment, but I, on behalf of the council, congratulate you. We're all certainly very proud of the campaigns you ran and acknowledge that it's not easy to put yourself out in the public realm like that. So well done to both of you, but it's great to have you both back as well. Item 11, unresolved business from previous meetings. We have nil. Now, with your indulgence, I'd like to ask that item 17.1, the proposed mixed-use development, 7 multiple dwellings and 1 commercial tenancy, lot 1, house number 331, West Coast Drive, Trigg, the yellow site development, be brought forward and considered in accordance with clause 4.2 of the meeting procedures, local law 2009. That's on page 329 of the agenda. Councillors, do I have a mover for that? Councillor Perkoff has seconded Councillor Proud. If we can just go to the vote to bring that forward. This is just to bring it forward, though. Yep. Yep. This is. Just 2 to go. Councillor Migdale and Ferrante. That is unanimous. Thank you, councillors. We will now go to Sweet. That's right. You can leave and just do that. Yep. So, yep. So, yep. So Councillor Migdal is declaring an impartial interest as she sits on the JDAP. So, and she's be leaving the chamber for this one. So we'll just get her to do the paperwork while she's out there and make sure the governors have it.
Where's well to listen, or it's not, you know, she's not having financial. Mr. Mayor, can I also ask that we bring forward the one on the?
Oh, you can't because we're dealing. Let's deal with this one first.
Oh.
Mr. Mayor, just a clarification. I don't think it's necessary for maybe not Councillor Farrelly and I, who are both JDAP members, to stand aside because I don't think we'll be hearing it. But he'll be back, won't he? Well,
So, Mr. Blanchard, is Councillor Boothman away for this? Yeah, he'll be expected to be back. So I don't think there's any reason you have to step out, Mr. Blanchard.
No, it's up to the individual councillor, but there is no requirement to step out from the decision making.
Let's just get clarification on this. Let's just make sure.
do you want a Do you want a
No,
impartial? The impartial conflict.
That's what I'm checking now, Mr. Blanchard.
Because we actually are on JDAP.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's no requirement to disclose a financial or proximity interest, which would require the elected member to leave the chamber. The elected member may choose to disclose an impartiality interest, and it is then at their discretion as to whether they leave the chamber or not. The development assessment panels have their own processes for dealing with council members who have participated in decision-making processes on matters before the development assessment panels.
So if you would like, you can both put an impartial interest and stay in the chamber. It's up to you.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I don't think we'll be called. Well, I don't think I'd be called. So I'd rather put an impartiality interest and stay in my seat in the chamber. Thank you.
So if you and Councillor Farrelly will acknowledge those, and if you can do the paperwork for those, please, and get them done as we start this off. So we'll now go to that item. Do I have a move of recommendation? Councillor Caddy?
Yes, please. I do have an alternative recommendation if the officers can bring it up, and it is quite lengthy. My apologies, everyone, but look, I will read it through. One is as per the officer's recommendation that Council endorses the City's Responsible Authority report to the Metro Inner North Joint Development Assessment Panel, which recommends refusal of the proposed mixed-use development. Two, that Council reiterates its reasons for refusal from its meeting of the 1st of December 2020, as no real changes have been made to the proposal since the Joint Development Assessment Panel meeting of the 9th of December 2020. So those additional changes for the officer's reason of refusal are listed below. So there's A, the application does not satisfy clause 67S of the Planning and Development Local Planning Scheme Regulation 2015 Schedule 2 deemed provisions, as the proposed car parking does not provide an adequate vehicular parking on site. There is an existing parking congestion issue in the vicinity due to the existing cafe use, and the proposed development will exacerbate this issue. The commercial parking bays proposed and their configuration on site are insufficient to satisfy the parking demand, and the applicant's justification that there is sufficient public car parking in the area does not recognise that these public bays have been provided for the community to access the beach, not to support a private development. In addition, the following additional reasons for refusal have been added. Yes, that the application does not satisfy clause 67M of the Planning and Development Local Planning Scheme Regulations 2015 Schedule 2 DEM provisions, as the development is not compatible with its setting, being surrounded by an area of residential R20 properties, and the excessive height, bulk and scale of the building would result in significant negative impacts on the residential amenity, streetscape and character of the local community. Two, the cumulative impacts of the discretions sought by the development will result in an excessive adverse impact on the adjoining residential properties and the immediate locality. And three, the Council has recently reviewed its local planning policy 4.2, mixed use and commercial centre guidelines, and has adopted the modified policy. The new policy specifies a maximum building height of 3 stories, and where adjoining sites are zoned residential, setbacks are required to facilitate streetscape continuity and minimise adverse impacts to adjoining sites. the development does not satisfy the policy objectives 1, 2, 3 and 4 of the draft revised policy. And having listened to the deputation, there are now 2 additional recommendations up there. Number 3, that if the Joint Development Assessment Panel is of a mind to not refuse the application, it is requested that the application be deferred for 14 days to allow sufficient time for the community to review the plans and make effective deputations to the JDAP. And 4, that council endorses a councillor, I suggest either myself or Councillor Farry or both, to attend to provide a deputation on the city's behalf at the Joint Assessment Panel meeting to be held on the 23rd of March 2021. I so move.
Thank you. And we just need a seconder for that. Councillor Farrelly, happy? Yeah, I'll just get a seconder first. Yep.
Can we just, put in the councillors Karen and or Farrelly so that we can then discuss?
Can I just check, just in terms of through governance, just with Councillor Farrelly being a deputy JDAP, it may...
Happy if it's just me, given that you're a deputy JDAP member.
I would suggest that might be safer for a council resolution because we haven't got a
And that's why we did it last time, just to separate the roles.
Yeah. Thank you. Councillor Sandra, you've got a question.
Yeah, just quickly, can I please ask if we can amend item 4 where it says city's behalf to council's behalf?
Sure. I don't think that's a problem. Are you happy with that, mover and seconder? Yes? Let's do that. Sure, and we'll just get Mr Rodich just has a comment, if we can.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just in terms of, I think reason B3, if the last line should just say, development does not satisfy the policy objectives 1, 2, 3 and 4, full stop.
Yep.
Because the policy's in play.
Great, you happy with that as well, mover and seconder? Good. Okay, if it's just a question,
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I guess you called me, didn't you? Look, my only question to you, Mr Mayor, is the RAR required to be amended in any way to reflect the amended recommendations?
Mr Rodich?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Councillor Spagnol, the council can't amend the officer's RAR. However, the recommendation now for the responsible authority report will be council's recommendation. So that will be placed at the front of the report. The report remains the same and the officer's recommendation is placed at the back of the report. So the recommendation today will become the recommendation of the RAR, but the council can't change the content of the responsible authority report.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just wanted to make sure that the JDAP got the message.
Thank you. I think they do. I think they will. Is there anyone opposed to this? If not, I will put the item. Go to the vote, please, councillors. Thank you, councillors, and that is unanimous, noting that Councillor McDale's out of the chamber for the vote. Yes, you may go get her now. So members of the gallery, that is unanimous in that recommendation. Thank you. Councillors, we will now move, and you're welcome to stay, of course, if you'd like to listen to the Audit Committee, and I didn't think so. Thanks for your patience, everyone. Any alternative motions that were submitted to governance prior to 12 p.m. today have been included, together with your run sheet in that order. Your running sheet is marked with an asterisk for those items. Councillors, do you wish to pull out any Audit Committee items? Councillor Ree?
Yes, please. Could I pull out 12.1, I think 1A2 on page 15, 12.1 CG1 on page 21 and 12.1 CG2 on page 96, please.
See, I did say we'd missed you. Is there any other items that need to be pulled out for this? If not, I will go to item 12.1 IA2, Procurement Internal Audit Report. Councillor Lagan, Chair of the Committee.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just let me get to the page. So I'll move the committee's recommendation to Council 1 and 2. That's on page 15.
Thank you. Seconded, Councillor Sandri. Councillor Ree, you're opposed, or do you have a question?
Don't know why a little bit of audit report is. With the that the medium-rated observations be listed on the management action plan for the audit review until completed. We did discuss that before. The medium-rated. Shouldn't all of those be on there until completed? Because we did have it on there before, and then they disappeared, and then there was no comment as to why they weren't completed. Or is this number 2 actually addressing that, saying they're going to be there until they're completed? Because the way it was worded last time didn't make any sense. Is this trying to address what I tried to comment on last time?
Sure. Ms Hawkins?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thanks, Councillor Ree. With regards to the low risk items, so the medium and high risk items will go on to the Audit Committee report. With regards to the low risk items, we do monitor those through the executive team. So we work with Mr Eakins, and we have reports that come through to the executive team to make sure that those are managed. But it's really trying to ensure that the Audit Committee deal with those which are more of a higher medium risk rather than those low.
Councillor Ree?
Is that compliant? Because I believe that the new procurement, it said that even anything that was low should actually be provided in a report. Even though it might be addressed internally, it is supposed to be brought to the table so at least councillors know what is considered low, medium, high. Because as a council, we don't know what is low, medium, high. We have to be guided by the staff. So there's
I'll get clarification for you. Ms Atkins?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Councillor. All of the audit findings are included within the attachments to the audit reports as they're raised, and all of them have an associated rating with them. They're followed up as the Director of Corporate Services has just outlined.
Thank you. If there's no one opposed, then I will put that. Oh, sorry, Councillor. Yep. Sure. Let's get this done. Okay, Councillor Farrelly. That is unanimous. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Caddy, you got a question?
Can I just please pull out CG3 as well? I forgot. Sorry.
Yeah, too late. Item 12.1 CG1 has been pulled out by Councillor Ree. Councillor Lagan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move the officer's recommendation in the report on page 21, part 1 and 2.
Seconded, Councillor Migdale. And is it a question or are you opposed, Councillor Ree?
I'm opposed.
Okay, I was just asking. Councillor Lagan, would you like to open debate?
Look, Mr Mayor, thank you. Audit Committee discussed this at length, and I think the discussion clarified for all members of the Audit Committee, and the vote reflects that.
Thank you. Councillor Migdale.
Nothing at this time.
Thank you. Councillor Ree.
Thank you. To start with, on page 30, could I have a reason as to why it was decided that that with a complaint you can no longer email, that you have to put it in writing when you keep getting told everything's got to be internet?
Sure. Mr Blanchard.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The reporting of misconduct on page 30 notes a number of methods of submitting disclosure of misconduct, including notification to the Chief Executive Officer, the making of a public interest disclosure, notifying the internal auditor via a phone number or by email or through the misconduct hotline, and over the page by reporting to external agencies. All these still remain valid options.
Councillor Ree.
Well then, why is it crossed out? Why is via email crossed out? Or maybe it's just my copy.
That's in part 2. No, it is.
Part 2, it actually says via emails crossed out. Is that an error or something?
I haven't got it in front of me, Councillor. Mr Blanchard.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I believe the councillor is referring to the method of reporting to the Chief Executive Officer. It can be by email, it can be by letter, it can probably still be by fax even. The crossing out of via email doesn't remove it as an option.
Just a point of clarification, if I may,
Councillor
on
Sandri.
that. It says, Councillor E has a point here. It does say in writing and posted. So, yeah.
Mr. So Mr. Blanchard?
Through you, Mr Mayor, we would be happy to include explanatory material indicating that the writing may be submitted in any means possible to the city via email, via fax, in writing through the post, or online through the city's website, and we're happy to make that change to the document.
Thank you. I think if you're going to take out email, you have to put in a definition. So if you're going to go writing by fax or donkey, whatever you want to do, it just needs to be clarified about that. My second point is where it's got the public interest disclosure must be made in right. The Public Interest Disclosure Act offers the employees making appropriate disclosure are protected from reprisal when reporting misconduct. Why is protection from reprisal taken out and in accordance with the Act? Why aren't the staff or anybody protected from reprisals if they put in a complaint? I find that in this current climate quite scary to be taken out.
Mr. Blanchard?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll read the amendment as it reads in the document. A public interest disclosure must be made in writing. Employees making appropriate disclosures are protected from reprisal when reporting misconduct.
Councillor Reid, does that answer your question?
No, because it says the employee. Is it the way this is written? And bearing in mind, this is the way the public are reading this too. The employees making appropriate are protected, and then it's got protection from reprisals. So I just,
Mr. Blanchard?
I think if you're going to do it, yes, we might need to make some changes, but we've got to realise that I have no idea what's in your head, and anybody else reading, I think, may not either. So if there's a misinterpretation, then it needs to be cleaned up.
Can I just get clarification from Mr. Blanchard? Is this something that can be held over? If Councillor Reid's got several items that need to be clarified tonight, is that what's going to happen?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Firstly, this is a track changes of the document from the previous time that Council adopted it, and we've endeavoured to show what the few changes in the document that we're recommending for tonight. There is no urgency on this item. If Council wishes to hold it over, then we can consider it at another time.
Yeah. Councillor Reid, I think it... No, I know you can't, but my suggestion is that we ask someone to hold this over. Councillor Sandri?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm happy to hold this over procedural motion to the next council meeting to allow further information on the document. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hatton has seconded that, and it's procedural, so we will put that motion. That is unanimous. Councillor Reid, we will set up a time for you to sit down with governance and go through all of your concerns. This isn't coming back to another council meeting if you haven't done that, Councillor Reid.
Mr Mayor, I think my track record will say that I have written a lot of emails over the years questioning things. I don't think I hesitate if I'm not questioning it.
That's
good. Face-to-face combat
Sit down,
is sometimes
Councillor. Sit down.
dubious.
Sit down, Councillor. Item 12.1, CG2 2020 Compliance Audit Return has been pulled out by Councillor Reid. Councillor Lagan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move the officer's recommendation on page 96.
Thank you. Councillor Sandri has seconded that. Councillor Reid, are you opposed or have you got a question? Your question.
On page 108, where we've got item local government employees, number 1, then we've got number 4, was the remuneration and other benefits paid to a CEO on appointment the same remuneration and benefits advertised for the position? My question is, we've changed the CEO's contract several times, and in doing so, when we've changed them, we didn't advertise any of those changes. So isn't that a breach? Because we have changed it quite a few times that I know of. I don't recall any of them going out to advertising to say, we're changing it.
Sure. Mr. Blanchard?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This question relates to a recruitment process that was undertaken during the period of the compliance audit return, which was last calendar year. We did not recruit a CEO during that time.
Councillor Ree.
So that's because it was not the appointment, the same remuneration. But aren't we, when we renew the contract, isn't that classified as an appointment?
Mr Blanchard.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. No, that's a different section of the Act.
There you go. Right, so
Okay, with 1 Administration 18C, did the local government approve a process to be used for the selection appointment of CEO before the position CEO was advertised? We haven't advertised for a while, but under the new legislation, don't we actually now have to advertise even if we're going to renew the contract?
Yes, Mr Blanchard.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and Council will note that the item relating to CEO model standards for recruitment is listed at item 13.1 on the agenda tonight.
Thank you. There's no one opposed to this, so I will put that item. Move Councillor Lagan, seconded Councillor Sandri. And that is unanimous. Thanks, councillors. And item 12.1 CG3 pulled out by Councillor Caddy. Councillor Lagan.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Can I move the alternative recommendation that was on the white paper and running sheet this evening? I believe it is...
Yeah, and if you can just read that out for us.
It reads, the Council receives an updated City of Stirling Strategic Risk Details Report as shown in Attachment 2 and Part 2, that the City considers risks of technical and legislative obsolescence of City assets and investments in the next quarterly Strategic Risk Report to the Audit Committee.
Thank you. And Councillor Caddy has seconded that. Is there anyone opposed? If not, I will put that. And Spagnolo, Councillor Spagnolo. Sorry. And that is unanimous. Thank you, councillors. And I will now go to the balance of reports. Councillor Lagan, would you like to move the balance of reports?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move the balance of the reports.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Migdale. We'll go to the vote. Councillors.
Is that me?
That is unanimous. Thank you. Members of the gallery, please be advised the remainder of the Audit Committee recommendations have now been adopted by exception resolution. We'll now move on to the Planning and Development Committee items. Item 12.2 CP1 is required to be pulled out as it was lost at committee. Is there any other items that you wish to pull out this evening? Councillor Caddy.
CP2, please.
CP2. Thank you. Councillor Farrelly. DS1. Thank you. Councillors, there's no other indication. We will go to item 12.2 DS1 then. Lot 14691, house number 2, Plantation Street, Menora, local development plan. This item was referred to the next committee meeting, however, if it's pulled out, then the officer's recommendation should be moved by the committee chair and obviously it can be debated. Okay, Councillor Proud, as chair of the committee.
I shall move the committee recommendation.
I think it's, let me just check. I think you have to, if it's pulled out, is it the officer's recommendation? No? Yes, committees, the officers. All right, I'm trying to read the notes that have been written, sorry. Right. Okay. Let me just check, because why do we allow it to be pulled out if it's still just a referral motion that's the same as the other motion? Because there's no debate. So then it shouldn't be allowed to be pulled out. Mr Blanchard?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The referral motion was made by a committee. It is still open to council to debate the substantive motion if it wants to.
No, so I just asked for clarification. I was told that the committee had to move the committee's recommendation as a chair, which is a referral. So put that motion. Okay. Okay, so the committee's recommendation, seconded Councillor Migdale. That is a procedural motion to hold it over to the next committee meeting. I will now put that. Thank you. That is unanimous. That was productive. So we will now go on to items 12.2. For those watching at home, we don't know what just happened either. Item 12.2, CP1, planning incentives for tree retention. This item was lost at committee. Councillor Proud as chair of the committee.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have an alternative rec. I'll read it out. That the city's officers engage with the development industry to ascertain what planning incentives could be offered to support tree retention on development sites. That a further report on the potential for planning incentives that could be offered to support tree retention be presented to a Planning and Development Committee in the second half of 2021, following engagement with the development industry. The reason for change is to receive feedback on planning incentives for tree retention in a more cost-effective way.
Thank you. And I had Councillor Migdale here as seconding that. Is there, let me just check. Is there anyone opposed to this? Councillor Farrelly? Then I will open debate. Go to the mover, Councillor Proud.
Thank you. Further to the informative debate that we had at the Planning and Development Committee last Tuesday evening, where the item was lost, I'd like to assure the community and the members of committee that members of council that weren't there, and community that have certainly shown us their support since councillors.
Sorry, can I just hold you for that? Councillor Farrelly, would you mind just turning that microphone off?
I'm
just
sorry,
echoing a bit.
yeah.
That's all right. Councillor Proud, sorry, if you continue.
Further to the community that's made their support well known, I can advise that councillors are very well aware of the negative impacts of canopy loss and fully supportive of methods that may be implemented to protect, preserve and increase tree retention on private property. Councillors and officers have been working very hard in a very positive way towards the goal that was submitted in my notice of motion back in November 2019. I'm really hopeful that the city submission as proposed on the next council item, CP2, draft planning, state planning policy 7.3, residential design codes, low and medium density, outlining our support for the tree retention initiatives will assist us in this regard. And I'm sure I speak for all elected members when I thank the community for offering their positive views and support for this critically important environmental issue. It's been really heartening to receive their overwhelming support on this item. It's really important. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Migdale, you seconded this.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I don't have a lot to add to that other than, of course, we all, I believe, share a great respect and understand how important our tree canopy and the retention of substantial trees is to all of us. I do understand that state government are going to be stepping up and reviewing this, which will have positive implications perhaps later on in the year or perhaps beyond. I think this sends a clear message from us to the state that this is the direction that we want to move forward in, and there's no harm in doing that. So I fully support this notice of motion.
Thank you. Councillor Farrelly, you were opposed, and I've got Councillor Sandria.
I'm opposed because I'd like to see the first motion put forward, not this alternative. I believe the council...
sorry, just if you'd like to do that, would you like to foreshadow?
Foreshadow that we return to the original
recommendation?
motion.
Sure.
Now, can I speak on...
Yeah, you can keep going.
I would like to congratulate Councillor Proud for putting it forward at the Planning Committee meeting, and I think it became a bit of a situation where it wasn't supported because we were concerned about the amount of money set aside to make a clear and defined decision on trees and the retention of trees in residential private properties. I believe, through the chair, directions here. Look, I believe that we should be adamant about putting forward funding. And I think that I think Councillor Prout has now come in with a soft option. I preferred the first option that went to committee. It was far more definite. It meant that we were willing to put some financial resources in place to support that. It is clearly needed to be addressed, and I don't disagree, therefore, with the previous two commentators on this, but it needs to be addressed with a really determined stance. If we don't do that, we will see more and more trees disappearing from our residential areas within the city of Stirling, and some of those, particularly as a kid growing up in Doubleview Woodlands and going to the beach in Scarborough, there are a lot more vacant blocks, a lot more tall and significant trees, and we now allow bobcats to bulldoze every damn tree on a block. We need to stop it, but we need to talk to the developers, because they're the ones who are ensuring that this continues, and we need to talk to the real estate agents as well, who reckon that it's better to sell a block that's sparse and has no significant trees on it, and they're all disappearing out of those streets. I therefore would prefer that we, with the foreshadowed motion, we follow that through.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Sandri.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a question. Is it possible that the engagement with the industry occurs after the advertising of the medium density code? Because I'm mindful the medium density code goes until, I think, end of April, so we don't really want to confuse the two issues.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to be a problem. Mr. Rodich.
Through the chair, Councillor Sandri, no problem at all. We'd intend to. The comment there is that we'll provide a report in the second half of 2021, so we're more than happy to hold off until, I guess, the closing period of the medium density code. We're well aware, of course, the building industry and the development industry are making comments in regards to that code, so it does make sense.
Cool, thank you. And may I make a comment, Mr. Mayor?
You can.
Thank you. So just with respect to some of the debate that's been put forward, I don't think the committee recommendation not to adopt it wasn't just about the money. It's about the fact that the state's actually starting to take this seriously, and they've included the provisions in the medium density code. And I think it's probably worthwhile noting some of the incentives that the state's considering in order for us to understand what we are going to seek from developers. So if, for those that have read the medium density code on the agenda tonight, you will note that new developments over 150 square metres in lot sizes now require 40 square metres of primary garden area, which is to be predominantly deep soil area. 20% of an entire site is to be deep soil area. A minimum number of trees are required to be planted per lot. An additional 50% of the front setback is to be impervious. And where there is a significant tree being retained, there is an incentive such a reduction of 5% of the deep soil area requirements. And also discretion to front setback to allow building to be moved closer to the street to facilitate the retention of the tree. A lot of these incentives are those that we have discussed around the table previously, and I think they're good measures set by the state government. And I'm just mindful, and I support us going to developers and having a discussion with them, but I am mindful that this is a lot for the industry to grasp at this stage. It is a significant change in the way that developers develop, and I think it's a much needed way in which they should be seeing how development should be undertaken. But I'm not sure how favourable they will see the city wanting to enforce something in addition to this. And I'll also note that the medium density code does not allow local governments to modify landscaping or tree provisions unless the WAPC approve it under the draft policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sandri. Councillor Ree.
I'd just like to say that I concur with Councillor Farrelly. I think we need to do it now. We need to send a message now. The people want it now. We should just do it now and just say the original motion is where it's going to get off the ground right now. And taking on board what Councillor Sandri said, there's a lot of changes going on. This actual recommendation, if we look at page 271 says right at the bottom, we're actually going to have some consultation with industry. That's what the money's going to. So if we've got all these changes, we want them to come up on board. This is a really great thing to bring everybody together, sit them in the room and say, this is what we want. Concrete jungles are over. This is what we want. It's what the people want. We want some green. We don't want green concrete. We want green trees. You know, we've got to sit there and get the people to the table. And I think Councillor Sandri is right. We need to sit there and spell it out. This is our city. People expect us to make the decisions. We need to get everyone together. So therefore, I think Councillor Farrelly's motion is really important to get off the ground right now while the changes are going on. $40,000 out of $350 million is less than we'd pay for a Mercedes car. You know, we should put it in perspective. Did you like that?
that in, didn't you?
Sorry,
Thanks, Councillor Reid.
I do believe as well that we have to bring the public along. There are a lot of changes to be made. I am concerned, and I said it right at the beginning about the design review panels. I failed to see with some of the approvals that they've given whether or not they're worth 40.
Point of order, relevance.
Yeah, let's stick to this, please.
Well, if you listen to my finishing statement.
Councillor Reid, just stick to the stick to the
That
item.
is the thing. We're looking at the changes in the building industry, which Councillor Sandry did raise, and I'm saying that one of the changes are the design review panels, which I cannot see how they are related. So I think that this is a great opportunity for us to show to the building industry, show to anyone else that wants to turn up, these are the changes, this is the way we're going along. We want to increase the green canopy, we want to make it healthier, we want to make it better for everybody. And then we not only are we creating jobs by concreters, we are creating jobs by landscapers. So it's a win-win. So it should be done now. So I cannot support this motion because I think this is just holding it up for longer. Let's go with the original, get it on the board and get people in the city moving forward.
Councillor Spagnolo.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, I'm not sure how the motion before us is actually holding this up. Look, we have a strategy in place. I don't think there's one councillor around this table that doesn't support the initiative that we have to retain trees on private property. Now, as far as I'm concerned, there is a strategy in place. We're complying with that strategy. And I think it's a great idea to confer with industry. It's something we often get criticised for not conferring with them. Here's a great opportunity to do that. I think we should also call for submissions from the public, just to give us some ideas as to what sort of incentives could be introduced. I mean, like most councillors today, I think like all councillors today, everybody would have received several emails where concern was expressed about the fact that monies had not been allocated. My understanding is that it's covered. It's covered as part of the strategy. We have a motion before the council that basically says, let's confer with industry, let's get on with it. So I don't think it's about the $40,000, as one or two of the councillors have already stated. It's really about getting on with it, and I think by actually adopting these two motions this evening will certainly set this going. So I would certainly commend the recommendations that have been put forward. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Spagnolo. And if there's... Councillor Hatton.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I actually support the $40,000 as I did in the previous committee meeting, on the premise that there's a lot of changes that have happened since 2017 with apartment dwellings, with grouped dwellings, and now we have the WAPC coming in on the Act, and we know that developers don't like to keep trees. I think that $40,000 will be used very wisely on the workshops, but very importantly, and one councillor mentioned a while ago, it's so important that the $40,000 be spent properly on capturing the right people and a number of developers, not just a small number. So it's really important that we have a synergy with developers and the WAPC, because there's so much that's been happening in the last 3 to 4 years, and now with this new movement with the draft density codes, I think that we could spend a lot more than $40,000, but it's got to be done targeted, really targeted, and it's got to capture a lot of developers. And I'm really unsure whether it will. That's the problem I have. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Sargent.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. I will be very quick. Just help me understand this, Mr Mayor. Number one that's on the board here, is that not exactly the same as the original recommendation, just minus 40 grand?
Yes.
And my next question, Mr Mayor, is are the officers comfortable being able to do this within their budgets?
Mr Littleton. Mr Rodich.
Yes. Yeah.
And he can use some of Mr Littleton's budget as well if he needs to.
I do know there's plenty there.
Councillor Sargent. Is there anyone else who'd like to discuss? If not, I'll go to Councillor Proud to close.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you for the discussion around the table. Particularly, Councillor Sandry was able to spell out a lot of the next item, CP2, regarding the low to medium density, which I couldn't have possibly fitted in my time frame. What we've got to remember, councillors, we've got a number of incentives and bonuses that we can actually implement now, and we do, in regards to tree retention on private land. Now, there was some pushback at committee, and $40,000 seemed a lot of money just to go and talk to the planning and development fraternity. So it's not that council didn't want to get a good decision out of this. We didn't go through with it. Was because we wanted a better outcome, and we wanted it to be more cost economical for us. So it's also really important with the next item, which is quite meaty, CP2 with the state planning policy 7.3.
Let's just stick to this one though. Just
I
keep you
know.
on track. I know.
The point is there's a lot of things in that which sort of impact, well, do impact definitely, on our ability and goal to actually retain trees on private land. You've got to remember, there can be trees on private land that some people's homes, their mums and dads developers, that is their superannuation. So we've got to be really careful. We've got to offer the right incentives to have people willingly and voluntarily save trees on their land and design around them as best they can. And that goes to the bigger developers as well. So this is a way of getting through that. We're just putting in this submission. If it gets through in the next item, if it's supported by council, there is a period that we're going to have to see how that filters out from the state government level. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, that closes debate. Move Councillor
Mr.
Proud.
Mayor, could I ask for just clarification for a minute, please?
Yep.
Based on what Mr. Littleton said, that the 40,000 can be incorporated now in the budget, could we put that in brackets somewhere then? To
No,
make it
we're closed
understood?
debate. Sit down, please, Councillor. We're not going to start putting stuff in. Well, that was what the debate was all about tonight. So move Councillor Proud, seconded Councillor Migdal. I will now put that, noting that Councillor Farrelly has foreshadowed the officer's recommendation. Councillor Perkoff and Ree and Farrelly, I think. Councillor Farrelly. Thank you. And that is unanimous. Thank you, councillors. We'll now go on to item 12.2 CP2, the draft state planning policy 7.3, residential design codes, volume 1, low and medium density proposed City of Stirling submission. Councillor Caddy has pulled it out. Councillor Proud as chair of the committee.
I'm happy to hand this over to Councillor Caddy.
Thank you, Councillor Caddy.
Thank you. I have, I suppose, an amendment to what was moved at committee. That council endorses the proposed City of Stirling submission on the draft state planning policy 7.3 residential design codes volume 1 low and medium density as shown in attachment 1 with the following amendment, that the submission includes specific support for clause 2.3.8 as it provides development concessions for retaining existing trees on site, and 2, that the Mayor writes to the Minister for Planning expressing concern at the lack of effective community engagement given that this proposal has the potential to impact on 58,000 dwellings, 59% of all dwellings in the City of Stirling. And the reason for the change, so as Councillor Sandry mentioned in the previous debate, clause 2.3 of the Medium Density Code proposes to provide incentives and bonuses to retain trees on sites. These provisions allow a reduction in the deep soil area and also a reduction in the street setback if a tree is retained. Council has adopted an 80% tree coverage target, and this proposed clause provides incentives for the retention of existing trees and should be supported. And secondly, the advertised low and medium density code, if implemented, will allow increased building height and density increases. These may have significant impact on the amenity of the city's residents, and the community has not been adequately consulted on the proposed changes. I so
Thank you
move.
for that. Seconded, Councillor Ree. If anyone's opposed, if not, I will put that. Thanks, councillors. That is unanimous. That takes us to the balance of reports, which leaves us with item 12.2A1, Small Business Friendly Approvals Project. Councillor Proud, as Chair of the Committee.
I'll move the balance of reports.
Seconded, Councillor Lagan. Put that and go to the vote. Councillor Ree. Councillor Caddy. Thank you, councillors. That is unanimous. Members of the gallery, please be advised that the remainder of the reports, which is item 12.2A1, has now been endorsed. Councillors, we'll now move on to the Director-Council reports. Takes us to item 13.1. The CEO will leave the room. And we'll go to item 13.1, which is the Chief Executive Officer Model Standards and Draft Acting and Temporary Chief Executive Officer Policy. I'll just wait a minute and then I'll ask for a move or a motion. Councillor Lagan.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to move 13.1, the officer's recommendation. I do have a few questions though.
Sure, and seconded, Councillor Sandri. Is there anyone opposed? Councillor Ree. So we'll go to you, Councillor Lagan.
Thank you. For anyone who's read through the documentation and who knows the changes to the Local Government Act, following the consultation and the changes brought in recently, I think this is a good forward move and aligns the contract structure and design with that's been discussed at Walga and in other places. My questions through you to officers are, firstly, does the city or has the city previously drafted the CEO contract as presented to the applicant, or has the applicant offered to the council a contract as drafted and designed by their representative, which may include preserved status?
Mr Blanchard, we have.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I could not answer the question as to the drafting of the current CEO's contract and the process that was followed in relation to that, noting that these standards and the policy relate to future actions and not past actions. I can confirm that our current CEO is a preserved CEO under the Local Government Act.
Thank you, and I'm sure that we can get the detail moving forward, but this model contract, for those who've read it and gone through the detail, does give us a framework from which we can sort a contract out, and the council has full control of that contract and the presentation of that contract. My next question is, through you again to officers, will the model contract see any future offered CEO contracts be only those structured by the city and its representatives, or sanctioned by the full council following consideration at the CEO Performance Review Committee?
Mr Blanchard.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. As I understand it, this relates to a future CEO contract. The standards on recruitment are clear. Council must adopt the terms of the CEO's contract. That is then put to the preferred applicant, and any changes to that contract then must come back to council for endorsement. So the entire process is in the hands of council to determine the conditions under which the CEO might be employed, and that negotiation is entirely in the hands of council.
Yeah, thank you, and it does align with my understanding, but I am looking for a future process where the council has a stronger understanding and a stronger control over the structure of the contract. Again, through you, Mr Mayor, my final question Can a preserved CEO contract ever have reductions made to remuneration or bans as paid and as recommended by the Salaries and Wages Tribunal?
Mr Blanchard?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Only with the agreement of both the council and the CEO.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just sorry, to finally, just to background why I've asked those questions. Look, I support the model standards, but I place on the record that I would move to have removed from any future contracts for any future CEO extensions or appointments the preserved status of the contract, and if councillors wish to investigate the Wolga model contract or other model contracts, they'll note that the preserved status basically ensures that the control is with the contract as written for the CEO at that time of the acceptance of the contract, and that there is less control for council. In situations where the council may financially feel that due to budget constraints or contract issues, they may wish to change it, they're not in a position to change it. So the preserved status is not something that is standard across all CEOs in local government.
Thank you, Councillor Lagan. Councillor Sandri? Nothing? Councillor Ree?
Yeah, I can concur with Councillor Lagan. I am still concerned that, and we did raise it at Welga, that this preserved status of CEO should have been addressed, and it hasn't been addressed. Because it's all right to sit there with people to last for 100 years, but it's not going to fix up the culture in places where you are right now, which is the idea behind the model CEO. The whole idea was to standardise across the state. If it's not applicable to everybody in the position now, it makes it a lot harder. So I think that's still something that needs to be addressed, and I don't know where, Mr Mayor, you can raise it at Welga at a council, but I just feel that should have been commented on. The other one is the remunerations. The additional remunerations, while it's not in accordance with the Salaries Tribunal, and again, you've got preserved status, the remunerations can go into hundreds of thousands of dollars, which isn't really addressed as to what is a remuneration and what is not. You know, two overseas trips, Qantas trips, you know, four-wheel drives, whatever else that comes up, expense allowance, clothing allowance, these were all supposed to be tapped under one. That was the whole idea as well, to make it more accountable. That didn't get addressed either, which I think is disappointing.
Point of order, Mr Mayor.
Yeah, what's your point of order, Councillor?
The point of order is that the committee has seen, or if they've asked for a copy of the contract, they has seen the total remuneration package for our CEO, and those items are included in that. So you can request it, and it is within the contract.
Councillor Ree?
It might be there, but the costings isn't. How much it actually costs, the expense allowance, and that isn't actually in there. It might have been a generic amount, but the actual costings isn't in there.
Yeah. So Councillor, I think I'll get clarification from Mr Blanchard, but I think it's important that we keep this item on the future CEO. So this isn't about the current CEO. This is a future contract.
That to me is an issue, which is why I asked you to raise it at Welga, because it's still not being addressed. So my other comment is with regard to this. Is acting CEOs? Right? So we go acting CEOs, page 291. If we're going on acting CEOs, according to this information, this particular acting or temporary, it's consistent with the city's delegation, the incumbency may appoint. So the CEO is the only one to appoint an acting CEO. Yes. But then it says that according to the actings, the bishop must be referred to council for determination. Quite often it's not referred to council because it's not usually time framed between, even though it says in here.
I think it depends on how long the process is for.
Yeah.
So it's the only time it has to come to council if it's for a period longer than the 4 weeks.
That's right. So that to me didn't tidy up what was the intent. Secondly,
I'm not sure what I understand what you mean. Are you saying you'd expect that any temporary appointment for a couple of days would come to council?
No, what they were saying when they were looking at the review of this under the select committee was that they shouldn't be having anybody, and no offence to any delegates, directors or anybody in the planet. But they were saying that everybody that's appointed the CEO should come for a council decision. That was the intention when it was discussed. Now, it doesn't make it workable, which we actually said at the time, but they said that they were doing a policy to address this. I find it difficult how you could get a policy to address it, number one. But number two, the way this is written is a bit confusing, and I don't think it does address it. It also, in here, is virtually saying that if you're a director, a senior employee, you already got the skills to be a CEO. I don't know that that was the intent. And so that concerns me, the way that's written. And I don't think that that was actually said when we had the discussions about trying to tidy all of this up. You're implying that just because you're a director, you're automatically a great CEO or good or possibly whatever CEO qualifications.
So I think it's important that's clarified, and that you're making some assumptions there. That's not what it's saying. But I would certainly expect that a director of the largest local government in Western Australia would have the ability and the expertise and the skill to act as a temporary CEO with their skill sets for a period of a week or so. I wouldn't think that we'd want to go out for advertising and get a CEO in for that period, if that's what you're suggesting, Councillor.
No, that's exactly what we were not suggesting when we actually went to the forum to discuss this over a year ago. That was the intent. We weren't doing that. What they were saying is that the way this was written, it is still not tidied up, in my opinion, for the intent we had at the time to allow CEOs to only pick one director over other directors to always do small little actings, which does occur, and that's what was the issue, that it does take out of the council direction when only certain directors are chosen to make decisions when certain things are happening, and that's the way it was sort of trying to get around that. That doesn't address this, and I know it's difficult. We did discuss it. It's very difficult to change in our time frame, but I just thought that this would be written in such a way to address it, that's all.
Thanks, councillors. But I think it is important to note that the directors in this organisation are on a rotation with that, and it's seen as a significant part of professional development for a director.
Which is a comment we actually made years ago to go on a rotation, but that was one of the things that came out. It doesn't make it, this doesn't say it should be on rotation. And whether or not, irrespective of who the CEO is, whether or not this actually should say this is on rotation, because that was the intent of a lot of councils.
So again, and without understanding exactly what your intent is, I don't think that was the original intent of this at all. I think it's very important that a CEO has the ability to determine certain things. There's many contributing factors. It might be a new director who hasn't got the skill sets yet and needs more time in the chair. It might be a director who's got an extremely high workload at that time. It wouldn't be suitable for them to form part of a rotation. So all those things take into account, but I think there has to be some flexibility in the policy to allow the CEO to make that decision. Yeah. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? If not, I'll go to Councillor Lagan to close debate.
Thank you. Just to clarify, Councillor Ree's suggestion of rotation, I'm not sure that I've ever seen the policy that states or a statement that states there is a rotation, but to suggest there hasn't been a rotation excludes the fact that at times when the CEO's taken leave, other directors have also been on leave or on holidays, so you can't automatically rotate into a director that isn't sitting in the position. I would agree with you that the directors, definitely at the City of Stirling, would all hold a skill set suitable enough to act in the role for less than 20 days. And I note that the local government review recommends that there will be specific CEO training, and I'm sure that would be open to any aspirant who feels that they may wish to take a pathway to being a CEO. Just in conclusion, I've moved this. I agree with the model standards. I think they're a good idea. I did disagree with the removal or the moving away from the public sector standards requirements, which say 5 years plus 5 years for CEOs. And when this was discussed at Walga, there was some concern that in a small country area, if you limit a contract to 10 years, it might be extremely difficult to then attract a new person to a hard-to-staff area if it's distant or a long way away from the city centre. I would still contend that aligning with the Public Sector Standards Act is advisable, and that after 10 years, especially if you do, if any of the elected members do any reading around the appointment of CEOs in private sector or government, there are a number of learned documents from universities around the world that suggest that a maximum of 10 years is probably where the person's meeting all of the things they're going to do in their own personal goals, and might be a good time to move on. As I said, I disagreed with the Walga recommendation. That doesn't affect this model standards here, and as the Director, Mr Blanchard has stated, it is up to full council to make the decisions about contract and length of time and all the portions within the contract, including termination or variations, that they may wish to deal with at the time that it comes back to the council.
Thank you. With that, that closes debate. It's moved Councillor Lagan, seconded Councillor Sandri. If we can go to the vote, councillors. Councillor Sargent. Thank you, and that is unanimous. That takes us to item 13. If we can get the CEO back in, and we'll go to item 13.2, trial improvements to committees. Do I have a mover of a motion? Councillor Farrelly.
You said Councillor Farrelly. Did you mean Councillor Caddy?
No, Farrelly.
No. Yeah, just your microphone, thanks. Yep.
Sorry, must be somewhere else. For the trial improvement to committees on page 294, to agree to that.
Thank you. Councillor Caddy, seconding. Is there anyone opposed? Councillor Ree? You're asking for an addition to go onto it? Yep, what's your addition?
My addition is where we've got the trial by adding number 1, endorses the trial from over the changes to the committees by adding property services to planning and development. I'd like to also add on page 299 footpaths. Footpaths because, and the reason I'm saying that is because we've got an issue at the moment with when you've got a house is approved on a property, and then they come past and they put a footpath in, and there's not enough room between the footpath and the road to park a car.
We're not talking about directorates within the city being changed. We're talking about what comes
responsibility.
I'm pretty sure we don't determine footpaths in the council chamber, Councillor.
I know. Well, we do. We get a lot of complaints about footpaths.
No.
But I'm just saying, I just would like that to.
So I'm going to
change
answer
that
the
to
mover
that
and
committee.
seconder. They're not accepting it.
I just thought it might be good for that committee.
Nice try, Councillor Ree. Is there anyone opposed? If not, I will put that motion. Thank you, and that is unanimous, noting that Councillor Lagan left the chamber for the vote. I'll now go to item 13.3, appointment alternative rep for the Committee of Perth on page 304. Councillor Proud.
I'll move the recommendation on page 304.
Thanks. Councillor Sandri has seconded that. Is anyone opposed? Councillor Farrelly. I'll go to you, Councillor Proud.
I'll just say I think Councillor Caddy could be an excellent representative. She will present the city in a very full way, could add valuable input to the City of Perth. She's had quite a bit to do with them and has met them and is engaged with them over, I believe, a number of years. So I believe she'd be an excellent representative, and I totally support it.
Thank you. Councillor Sandri.
Thank you. I think that Councillor Caddy is fully capable of being appointed as a representative on the Committee for Perth. But in saying that, I just have a quick question.
Sure.
I think the report gives us some indication in terms of what it is, but what do they actually do, and what is the appointment process? Thank you.
Sure. Mr. Blanchard.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Committee for Perth has a broad remit to essentially improve Perth and Peel region as an urban centre. I'm not a strategic urban planner, and I won't go much beyond that. But if you want a more detailed explanation, I'm sure Mr. Rodich can help you with that. I will address the second part of the question as to the nomination process. Many external organisations to the city ask the city to nominate representatives. Their processes differ. Some of them ask us to nominate an elected member. Some of them ask us to send them a list and pick one from the list. In this case, the Committee for Perth has written to us indicating that it would be willing to receive Councillor Caddy as an additional representative for the city, and that is the process that the Committee for Perth has followed in this instance.
Thank you. And just one question, who else sits on the committee? Like, is it normally councillors, directors, CEOs? What is?
So, yeah, and it's important to note, this isn't the board of the Committee for Perth, it's just an alternative representative. So I think it's Mr. Henderson, is it? No, Mr. Rodich from the city. Yeah. Yeah, Mr. Rodich.
Through the chair, in terms of the future work project, I'm the only local government representative on there. It's largely from the private industry, BHP, Wesfarmers, are on the committee, and there's no decisions being made, but it's basically to discuss direction in terms of the studies that the future work are considering at the moment. They're considering, what is the future of work in Perth, and there's a lot of research going on to that. And I was at a meeting this afternoon where we just provided an update by a university person from New Zealand in terms of the study she's carried out recently in terms of what are the trends in Western Australia in terms of employment and the like.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for that. That was enlightening. I haven't heard of it before I read the report 2 days ago. But in any event, I think Councillor Caddy will be an excellent appointee. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Farrelly.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I really do not have a personal negativity towards it. It's actually the process. We've heard about the capabilities of this, but it's the purpose of the initial recommendation. In the sheet, it says the council to consider appointing an elected member as an alternative representative to the Committee for Perth. I don't recall that as being the action of this evening's recommendation. The council has not opened up the appointment of the elected member as an alternative representative. It has come done in a different manner. It is not, in my opinion, a fair and transparent process. I don't believe it is something that we want to continue. It is something that I understand has somehow arisen from the Committee for Perth. I and a number of other councillors are also communicating with the Committee for Perth because it's very strategic. It looks at long directions of planning, transport, etc. And I would like to add to that an alternative recommendation that for the future...
So it's an alternative rec, or would you like to,
I will foreshadow, no, I would like to have an alternative recommendation.
Let's have a look. I'm just trying to work out if it's just an amendment to this one.
It's amendment, whatever you like.
Yeah.
Well, it's an amendment, so that we actually
So the amendment number 2. So read your amendment.
That the Chief Executive Officer writes to the Committee for Perth seeking information on the process for the future appointment of an alternative representative before the special council meeting following the October 2021 council elections.
Okay. I need that in front, yep. So the CEO writes to the seeking information. Okay, is there a seconder for that amendment? Or yes, Councillor Reid? Yep. No, we're just voting on the, well, we are, because we're voting on an amendment. So let's just get this Yeah, I know. So, sorry, can we just have this up for a sec? Yep. So, the alternative rec isn't an alternative rec. It's just asking for an amendment for point 2. So, that's an amendment that Councillor Farrelly has put up, the CEO Rights Committee for Perth. Councillor Ree has seconded that. Is there anyone opposed to this? Question, Councillor Proud?
Mr Mayor, perhaps the CEO could make a
Sorry,
phone call.
Councillor Farrelly, can you sit down for a sec? Yep.
Perhaps yourself or the CEO could make a phone call in relation to that.
Yep.
I'm just going to make a comment. From my understanding, from what...
Sorry, so if we're going to debate the amendment...
okay, no, that's all right.
I do have to allow Councillor... No, I'm looking at Councillor Lagan. So what are you trying to do now, Councillor Lagan? I'm trying to work out, is anyone...
Yeah, just
does
wanted to
anyone
ask a
want
question for clarification.
Okay, I'll allow a question, but otherwise we'll open debate on the amendment.
So through you, Mr Mayor, my understanding was this was by way of invitation?
Yes.
Yes, so I'm not sure why we need to have a discussion about it coming to any committee for decision. It was an invitation. In fact, it is a positive thing for the council.
Yep. I'm just clear, if we open debate on this, then we should go to Councillor Farrelly. No, with this many questions, I'm going to allow Councillor Farrelly should be allowed to speak on this because everyone is doing their little pretend it's a question and give me a debate. So Councillor Farrelly, this mayor's not falling for that. Councillor Farrelly, would you like to debate your amendment?
Through the chair, I would like to raise this. It is actually a place where the council is being asked to nominate, and I'll reiterate that, to consider appointing an elected member as an alternative representative to the committee for Perth.
Sorry, I have to clarify now that isn't the case. The motion on the table is that Councillor Karen Caddy be appointed, and I can tell you the letter didn't ask for an elected member. The letter from the Committee of Perth asked for Councillor Caddy to be appointed. So the opportunity tonight is to vote for or against that.
Okay.
You can speak on the amendment, though, or the addition.
Well, the reason, I will speak on the amendment. In regard to this position, where we have a name put forward, it is actually where you have a candidate that has been chosen by an external body, and we are, without any further discussion, going to approve it. This external group, as I mentioned, is a strategic urban planning group with quite a membership of quite important and pivotal people in the Perth urban planning community. Also has connections with the University of Western Australia.
So, Councillor Farrelly, it's not I want to stifle debate, but we're not debating anything about Committee for Perth or any... This is really just debating about why you want to have your amendment.
Well, I believe that in fairness and to not put others at a disadvantage, and in fair and equitable and transparent process, we should have this open for the future as a cross-council nomination. And regardless of what is out there, I believe that you have to actually look at what the opportunities are as a councillor and offer all those same opportunities to all councillors. At the moment, there seems to be a bit of a separation or a difference on what opportunities are coming to certain councillors, and I believe we need to start assessing when are we going to actually prevent any potential disadvantage to councillors and their opportunities to sit on external bodies. Thank you.
Councillor Ree, you seconded this, I think. Did you? Yes. Yep.
Yep, I seconded it. I seconded on the idea of procedural fairness, I think. I am concerned that we have an officer. We are very, very fortunate to have an officer that knows a lot of things that is on this committee, and he's a strategic planner. I don't think anybody in this room would come close to his qualifications, and I would be concerned that he would be replaced. And I think it's more kudos for us.
No, it's not to replace him, Councillor Ree. Let's clarify that.
So 2 people from Stirling on it.
Yes. But again, let's be really clear. First of all, we're debating the bit about the CEO writing to the committee, but I can't be clearer that there's no ulterior motive here. The director currently sits on the committee. We have received a request, and that request is before you, and it is entirely up to councillors whether they vote for that to happen or not to happen. But let's go on to why you want the CEO to write.
I actually think it's important to understand why, after all these years, we would have that. There's people who could write every day to say, could we be on the rabbit committee and can I be on the chicken committee? Does that mean every one of them will come to council?
I would be happy to endorse that if you'd like to, Councillor Reid.
I will make sure I get one of those when I'm having a cup of tea with the rabbits. I just think that it's unnecessary for us to approve something like that unless we know what's going on. Shouldn't be coming to the council table unless we actually know what the implications are to the city. Are we going to be paying petrol and parking and clothing and everything for them to go? So we're not in any cost?
No.
So do they get actually
No, it's in the report. There's no remuneration.
I'm just making sure, because it doesn't matter if there's remuneration, you can still get petrol. So I just find that it's very odd that it would come out. I think from a committee point of view, other people might question why would you have two people from City of Stirling on it and you wouldn't have one person from South Perth and one person from Stirling. So I think some people might look, the City of Perth having two people from Stirling on it might not look very good either. So, but I think the process is all wrong, and I think this actually allows the process to be seen as fair and appropriate.
Okay. Thank you. Is there anyone who'd like to speak? Councillor
Mr.
Sandri?
Mayor, can I move that the Speaker no longer be heard and the motion be put? Thank you.
You were the Speaker. You were you put... Thanks, Councillor. Let's have a seconder for that. I think I do have to. It's a procedural. So, Councillor Migdal, this is just the amendment. We're not debating the actual item. All we're deciding here is if the CEO writes to the Committee for Perth. Yeah. This is a procedural that this motion be put. So we are now voting on that. So we're not voting on the amendment. We're voting that the motion be put. Is that right? No, I think, let me just check, because we've had this is just that the motion be put now. Is that right?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have a substantive motion on the table. An amendment was moved to that motion. We now have a procedural motion to put the amendment motion. So this is the motion. What council is voting on is, should we stop debate on the amendment motion and put the amendment motion?
Yes. That's as clear as mud. Council is still wondering, Mr. Blanchard, are we voting at the moment on a procedural that the motion be put, or are we actually voting on the amendment?
Mr. Mayor, I'm wondering how we got here.
Councillor Sandri,
if you vote in favour of this motion, there will be no more debate on the amendment, and then the Mayor will put the amendment motion.
Okay, good. Okay.
If you vote against this motion, we'll keep on debating the amendment motion.
Yeah. So it's not voting on the amendment, it's just voting that we're going to put the amendment. Would have been quicker to allow the debate, Councillor Sandri. Let's go. She's been waiting weeks to do that, I know. We're not voting on the item, we're voting on whether we're about to put the amendment. There's no debate, let's get it done. All right, that motion is unanimous, so we will now put the amendment. So we're just voting on item 2. This isn't the substantive, it's just the amendment. I will now put that motion. This is the amendment, only the amendment, number 2. That motion is lost, and we'll now 10 to 4, and we'll now go back to the substantive motion and continue debate. Any further debate? If not, Councillor Spagnolo. Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I think Councillor Caddy would be an ideal candidate. In fact, I think anybody around this table would be an ideal candidate. But I think there's a fundamental issue here, and that is the process. I think that it's extraordinary that an external body writes to this council and actually dictates to us who should be on that committee.
So
I
again,
believe the question
just
should
for
have been-
clarification, I think it's really important that we note that what you can agree or disagree with the process, no one has dictated anything. We've received a letter, and to bring it into the open, it was put as a council recommendation, and council can either endorse or refuse it, but it wasn't dictated.
With due respect, Mr Mayor, the office has actually recommended that Councillor Caddy be the person to be a part of the Perth committee.
No. The officer recommendation was in line with the letter. The letter requested Councillor Caddy. It didn't request a councillor.
Maybe so. Look, the point I'm trying to make is, as I say, I think we've got to look at a couple of things here. There are several councillors around this table who actually serve on a few external committees. There are some that probably don't serve on any. I think that if the Committee for Perth wanted Councillor Caddy to be part of that group, then they should have approached her personally.
They did.
But if they approach the City of Stirling and we're asked to make a decision, and we're a council that pride ourselves on transparency, then the correct procedure, in my view, Mr Mayor, is for us as a council to actually call a ballot if there are other people that are interested. I certainly am not interested, but I am interested in fairness. I believe that it should be done properly if it's coming to this council for a decision. I don't believe that any endorsement of Councillor Caddy was required if she was actually invited by that group. But the moment it hits this table, well then we are all eligible as far as I'm concerned. I think we either make a decision that it's... look, I don't mind whether it is Councillor Caddy. I'm just talking about the fundamental process. We've got a situation here where we've been asked to support Councillor Caddy, and look, 9 times out of 10, I would support her. But I think where you've got a process... Look, I'll be honest with you, when I first read this, I actually thought, and please don't take this the wrong way, Mr Mayor, I thought, oh, there's been a bit of lobbying. And, you know, it may not have been the case, but I think anybody that reads this from outside will probably get that perception. Now, let's come back to the transparency. Look, we might all vote for Councillor Caddy, but, you know, let's do it properly. Let's find out whether there are other people around this table who are interested in actually nominating for this particular committee. I think that's the fairest way to do it, Mr Mayor. Doing it any other way will create doubt.
So, and all I can do is clarify again. The letter that came to council, it seemed that the intent was that a discussion had been had with Councillor Caddy, and they were keen to have Councillor Caddy as part of their committee, and they did invite her. It's only because when the letter came here, it added the words "represent the city." So in the openness and transparentness, that is why the CEO talked to the manager of governance and then put it in front of you for a decision.
Well, Mr Mayor, can I ask, and like I said, I'm happy to support Councillor Caddy, but I think in the interests of fairness, can I ask whether there is any other councillor that is interested in this role? And if there is, well then I believe that a ballot would be in order.
That's not the item on the agenda though. You just have to...
Oh.
Councillor Caddy first.
Thank you. And look, maybe I can help to explain how this came about, and that might set some people's minds at ease. Look, the Committee for Perth is a policy development committee. They cover a wide range of policies. They're not an urban design committee. They cover... I originally got involved with them when they did the work on gender equality, on filling the pool. Do you remember that landmark report? And I've been going to their events and following their reports since then. They've been doing some recent work on diversifying the economic base in WA, which is how I got back in touch with them recently, because I was doing some research for our economic development strategy and understanding how we could leverage the research that they were doing in how did I diversify WA's economic base into the work that we were doing about trying to support business growth in the City of Stirling. I asked for and got a meeting with the CEO to discuss how I, as an individual, could get more involved. We also started talking about how the city could leverage the research they were doing, particularly in... They're also doing some fundamental research at the moment about the nature of cities and the future of work. And I mentioned during the conversation that that would be research that would be very interesting to hear about in terms of how we design our new Stirling City Centre project and the Herdsman Glendalough project. I also, during that conversation, talked about my strategic roles at BHP and Rio Tinto, because this is not a local government organisation. And as Director Audit said, it's mostly made up of people from industry. So they're not looking for a whole heap of people from local government to go on. But given that I had a background both in local government and in mining, the CEO felt that I could contribute positively. And so she said she would write to the CEO, given that the city is a bronze member of the committee for Perth. As a bronze member, you were able to send people to meetings, and that was the easiest way for her to invite me to attend meetings, to be part of the conversation. This is not about seeking more people from local government. In fact, I think we're in a very privileged position because very few local governments even get a seat on the table. And I think having the opportunity to have the seat on the table means that I can bring back to the City of Stirling access to a whole heap of research that's really relevant to the strategic planning work that we do. I'm volunteering my time to go onto this. There is no remuneration. I'm not going to be claiming any benefits. The only reason it's been put forward as something through council is because we are a bronze member of that organisation, and it enables her to invite me to events in an easier and more straightforward way. Hopefully that helps to clear stuff up. This is not about an open ballot. There was no lack of transparency. It was simply that there was a feeling that I could contribute to the debate given my joint background both here and in the mining sector.
I have Councillor Ree next.
Yeah,
I've got a list here.
I think there's lots of people around this table who've had to deal with this little group on many occasions. I've been to a lot of functions, and I think around the table we've probably got lots to offer. I think the process is still wrong. I think it's very concerning that you would represent the city be the city's representative. Should be something that we would be talking about with our committees in October. So from a governance point of view, I'm concerned that this wouldn't be part of that governance where we elect councillors to each role, each committee.
The recommendation actually says that. It's until 16th of October 2021.
But at that time, I am concerned but it wasn't taken out, even though the report does say Councillor Caddy, as Councillor Spagnolo said. It wasn't actually put out to all the rest of the councillors. We don't know what happens behind closed doors. We don't know what the criteria was. Representing the city. If it's going to be a report back, where is it in this report to say it's reporting back? There is nowhere.
It's not a decision-making committee and it's not reporting back.
Well, I'm sorry, Councillor Caddy just said that. She said that she can bring a lot back to report back to this council.
In an informal... Councillor Ree, let's clarify. It's not a decision-making committee and she will not be reporting back to this council. I'm sure she may in an informal way let you know of what she's been doing. You're welcome to have a chat to her. But that wasn't her debate.
That was her comment she made.
It wasn't.
Well, when we look at... Well, I'm sorry. When we look at all the other committees that people are on that we've been elected to, you are representing as a councillor of the City of Stirling. That's your role on it, whether you're MRC or whatever. You know, if councillors come up and sit there, other people write in, are we going to go through this episode again? Are we going to sit there? If it's a councillor position representing the City of Stirling, I find that very serious appointment. That's representing all of us.
And that's why it's before council.
And it's not come as a report before council, in my opinion. It isn't open to all councillors, whether or not we wanted to do it or not, whether or not there's a criteria for us to be able to go on or not. I am concerned at the process, and it's irrespective whether Karen Caddy's friends with them or not. That's not relevant. The thing is, this process is wrong, and we've got to sit there and make sure we go back to proper processes. So it's not in any way personal. This process is not appropriate. And when we're trying to get governance underway, when we've got all these new code of conduct regulations upon us, this is a classic of advantaging one council and disadvantaging another. Not only in the City of Stirling, you could say it all.
I can read the room with the point of orders. There's no disadvantage to any other councillor.
Oh, I'm talking about the councillors in the whole of the state. if you only have one councillor in local government on
So
it.
take that up with the committee for Perth.
But that's what I'm saying. It could be perceived with these new rules. That concerns me, and that could be unfair on Councillor Caddy, if it was perceived like that. So I think in the bigger picture, we've got to show that we're fair. I cannot support this because I don't want to be part of not showing true governance, not showing a proper method of what we're doing. We have Mr. Roddick at that committee to come back and tell us things if we really need to have information. And I won't say any more.
Thank you. Councillor Thornton.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Something that's not clear to me is if this
Councillors,
is,
can I sit quiet, please?
if this is a position where they're representing the city, how is that member then going to be informed how to represent the city on a position?
No, so I think it's really important. There's several different, and we've made references to other committees tonight. There are several committees where councillors, whilst they're a councillor all the time, and they're representing the city of Stirling, it doesn't indicate the true sense they're representing the council's decision-making process. So, for example, if Councillor Sandri sits on the LRC, I think it's called, she's there to be purely an independent person on that committee or that board. Same with Mandari, or they may represent the city's views, but they're operating as an independent board member in that situation. This isn't, however, a decision-making board. It's just a committee.
Is it going to inform policy in any way that could affect us?
I wouldn't think so.
They're purely a research body.
Sorry. Yep.
No, they're not. They're a party place.
Let's go to Councillor Migdale. Councillor Farrelly, you've already
Thank you,
spoken.
Mr Mayor. Can we put this item, please?
You can't.
I'd like to put the item, Mr Mayor.
Can we just do the debate?
I'd like to also ask a question about the way it's
You can ask this question. Just wait though, please.
Well, if we're going to put it,
Yes,
that
you
doesn't
don't
give
get
chance.
you don't get to decide that, Councillor Farrelly. Councillor Migdale, if you'd like to speak, speak. Otherwise, can we please just finish this item? We've just about.
Mr Mayor, I asked to put the item, please.
Thank you. Okay. Then is there a seconder to put the item?
No.
Councillor Sandri, we are now voting whether we put the item now. Okay, let's have the vote up. This is a procedural to put the item. There's someone who's done something wrong here. It's me. Okay, I didn't work out what that mouse was doing circling my name. That item is carried, so we will now put the motion. So we're putting the substantive motion, move Councillor Proud, seconded Councillor Sandri, that Councillor Carey be appointed as the City of Stirling's alternate rep. If we can go to the vote, please, councillors. And Councillor Hatton and Farrelly. Thank you. And that motion is carried 10-4 with Councillor Caddy, Ferrante, Hatton, Lagan, Migdale, Perkoff, Proud, Sandri, Sargent and myself 4, and against Councillor Farrelly, Rees, Spagnola and Thornton. Thank you, councillors. We'll now go on to item 14, which is motion of which previous notice has been given. Item 14.1, notice of motion from Councillor Felicity Farrelly, external minute notification, page 307. Now you may speak, Councillor Farrelly.
Thank you. Through the chair, I would like to, the notice, the recommendation, not the staff recommendation, but the elected members be notified. Since that
sorry,
has,
yep. So which recommendation do you want up? Your
308, what is it?
So there was yours that you obviously put up. There was an alternative rec. Is that the one?
Oh yeah, that's right. Yep.
Thank you. That's all we need.
Yep.
And let's just get it. So we got No, sorry, we need it up so we can see who's going to second something. Yep. So who's going to second it? You can sit down. Councillor Ree, is there anyone opposed? Councillor Migdale? Are you opposed? No? Okay. Is there anyone opposed? If not, I will put this on. I've got what you put up there, I think. Let's have a check. That's not what she asked for, Councillor Ree. So the city continues its current practice of... It's getting late. Let's just... Everyone just relax. Councillor Farrelly, can you read out what motion you would like up? It is your motion, so you can have whatever motion you want up there. Yeah, stop. Councillors, thanks. You need your microphone, Councillor.
On page 308, and what I was going to say with that...
So I need you to read it out now.
Oh, okay.
I just think it's important because...
The elected members be notified through the Friday update of the release of agendas and minutes of the following external meetings. Mindarie Regional Council, Tamala Park. Now, I've taken into account that the Development WA Advisor Group is not a part of that requirement, so I will omit that.
But let's take that one out, yep.
For the Transport Liaison Working Group, which is the West Coast Highway Future Planning Collaboration, and other government committees and boards that impact on the amenity of residents and financial outcomes of the city, and the Metro Northwest Joint Development Assessment Panel. In regard to number 4, I would actually, at this stage, because I've read what the officers have said about 300 plus committees, I would just leave it as the Transport Liaison Working Group, West Coast Highway Future Planning Collaboration, and delete and other governmental committees and boards that impact the amenity of residents. I think we can add those when questions are being asked and required. So I'd like to...
Sure, and the intent of this is just that it's just notified that the release of these agendas is there and then they can go search, so it's not...
And you have a little thing on the, where you just press the button.
A link.
Yes, a link.
Yep.
Thank you.
That's right. Is there a second for this? Councillor Ree, you still happy to second that? Is anyone opposed? Councillor Migdale? Councillor Farrelly, would you like to speak to it?
Look, it's in regard to the fact that as a councillor that's probably now this is my 15th month on council, there's a number of issues that are coming before council in the future which are discussed at Tamala Park, Mindarie Regional Council. If we are not kept informed of the minutes over the annual basis, we will not be as aware of a decision-making process. In terms of the Transport Liaison Working Group, that has a huge impact on the amenity of an area. I do have a personal, what do you call it, proximity or whatever in it, but not a financial, as everyone keeps saying. But that's very important for us to keep aware of what has occurred as the meetings are held. It is very easy for those who are councillors who are on these groups, on these committees, to not be aware that when you are not on these committees and you're not necessarily getting an update from those said councillors, that you need to really have an opportunity to keep yourself informed of what has occurred through each of the meetings. I'm purely asking that we have a very accessible link, that we have a prompt to tell us that one of these meetings has occurred and the minutes have been delivered. And I particularly will then, in regard to point 4, the Metro Northwest Joint Development Assessment Panel, after just being a deputy recently, I believe it is worthwhile for people to be given a link to the many JDAP attendances that the JDAP councillors perform. It keeps you informed of what is happening in the city. I understand, and look, I do appreciate that some of you are very much, have been on council for a long time. You are very much aware of when these things happen and why you have linkages with other members of the committees. You probably get together over a glass of wine, some of you, and discuss them. I don't actually have that opportunity, and I'd like to be able to still be kept informed.
Councillors, can we just give some respect, please, to the person speaking?
I'm actually talking because I think this really is important for councillors that have been in situ on this council for a while. You need to appreciate the fact that I, as a new councillor over the last 14 months, have not been aware of even where some of these minutes are to be found. And it wasn't until I started to ask questions, then I try and refine them, and for whatever reasons, they don't seem to be in the way I got them before, because they're not there every fortnight or something, so I'm not regularly doing it. I therefore would like to be kept informed. I would like to follow the logic of these decision-making processes on these committees. I'd like to be kept informed what happens at the JDAPs. I understand at Karrinyup from talking to Councillor Boothman, there have been so many JDAP decision-makings at Karrinyup that he couldn't remember the amount of times. I was never aware of that until the Karrinyup people asked me to attend a meeting with them in the library at Karrinyup when the high-rise
Let's just get back to this.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. And then when I realised that this is only one of so many. So I think as a councillor to be kept well informed, it is just a simple action for the staff. When these minutes come through, when a JDAP is announced, we're given a link to get to those particular things. Thank you.
Councillor Reid?
Thank you. I actually think it's a good idea because, after all, it shouldn't take any more work from the staff because they already know, because the links to all this should be there. I just wondered whether or not the elected members be notified through a link on the Friday update, whether or not we need to put a link.
No, I think that the intent was there. That was clarified in the motion.
Oh, well, we have
Yep,
to
the
remember
Friday
that one.
update would notify and have a link.
Okay, my other comment is, are all these reports in the public realm already?
That was it. I think that was in the report.
Well, I've got a yes here and I've got a no over there and I've got a yes there and a no there.
Yeah.
But I'll go with you.
So let me answer. Yep. Mr. Blanchard?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. As outlined in the report, the Mindarie Regional Council and Tamala Park Regional Council are bound by the same provisions as the city. Their agendas and minutes are on their website, and there's a link to that from the city's portal. The Joint Development Assessment Panel reports are available when they go up. The Transport Liaison Working Group, there's no requirement for it to produce agendas and minutes, and we're not sure if we're actually going to be able to produce anything from that group, but we will make investigations if Council so resolves.
Councillor Reid?
Well, and, hang on, wait a minute. Go on. I sent some member of the astute public sent me an article that was in the paper about, and it read right at the top of it, Tamala Park, and it actually said in there that, and it started off with local government notices, Tamala Park Regional Council, Unit 2, Scarborough Beach Road, disposition of property, section blah 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 of the Act, right? And it had the actual lot, the purchaser, which was interesting, and the lot and the price, the valuation $255 and the price $265. And somebody said to me, "Did we sell in a loo?" No, I didn't know that, but I sent it to an astute Mrs. Hawkins who told me that we didn't. But that's why little things like if we had the link to Tamala Park, I could have just gone that link and said to them, "Go find the link," and then you go find it.
You could have anyway.
Well,
I don't think that relates to this item. I'm not belittling the item, but I don't think that has any relationship with this item.
That's just an example of.
But I'm saying it's not. It's nothing to do with this item.
No, it is, because that's a Tamala Park an example. Thank you. What I'm saying is that all these things, we've got councillors going all over the place, definitely going all over the place now, so that we don't even know where people are. So this is actually tidies it up, unless you can find out things. My only point would be, why would it have to be confidential in the Friday update? If it's not really confidential and it's not really out there, does it really have to go through the Friday update? That's my only point.
I don't think there's anything about confidentiality in this motion. It's purely that Friday update goes out to councillors every Friday, so it's an easy avenue to provide them the information they need.
Oh, well, that's all right.
Can
then.
I?
No, you
Okay.
can't.
No.
So I'm very supportive of it. I think it opens it up. It's a good accountability thing for the City of Stirling. It shows good governance. It shows that, you know, whatever councils are up to or wherever they're attending, that people can easily see the link and other councillors can follow and save the staff time.
Yep. Councillor McDowell, you're opposed?
Essentially, I'm not opposed. I just don't quite understand when all of, obviously, bar the working group, which doesn't have an agenda, but when everything is readily available, not only to councillors, but to the general public, one would need to then just be proactive and type in Mindarie Regional Council into Google, which will bring Mindarie Regional
chair.
Council.
Thanks, Councillor.
Excuse me. I find that very offensive, the way I'm being spoken to.
Thank you,
I
Councillor.
apologise. That's
Yeah,
not
I
my
think you should-
intention.
Councillor, how about I chair the meeting?
So, Mr.
Just
Mayor.
keep it through the chair.
So, Mr. Mayor, what I'm saying is, when you Google any of 1, 2, or 4, you can find a website, and when you click on the website, there will be a link to any and all meetings that to the agendas. So, I am assuming that a link in a Friday update would be to the website itself, because there's many meetings and agendas on there. I just don't understand. I don't get it.
And I think
Thank
the
you.
intent of this is quite clear. It's not to change anything other than to just have a notification. So it's basically, Councillor Farrell has made it clear, if you're not on those committees, you don't know when the meetings even occur sometimes. So it's just that notification that there's been a meeting, there'll be an agenda available. That's all. I'm assuming we don't all need to debate something like this, do we, tonight? But we can, surely. I think we've got, yeah, that's all right. I've got Councillor Thornton first. Yep.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that access to information is actually quite an important issue, and it's grounded in human rights. Access to information is one of the first pillars of access rights.
Again, through the chair, if we can.
Yeah, sorry. And it's also enshrined in Article 19 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and also the International Covenant of Civil and Political Rights. So it's really important that we have access to this information that's clear, it's easy for us to get to. I know that we're going to be, well, we're going to have this new platform called, I don't know if I'm allowed to mention it, social listening. That's where we're going to be able to find everything that we're interested in all in one, one area. Why can't we have these minutes and agendas all found in one area as well?
Thank you. Then I had Councillor Proud, and then I had Councillor Spagnola.
Two places that are really quick to look at this. On the councillor portal, there's a number of
Councillors, can I just ask you to sit down? We don't need lectures from every councillor about where to find this. I think if that's not the intent of this. Councillor Farrell is well aware that she can find it somewhere else. That's not the intent of this. So I'm happy to have debate, but let's not get everyone up to give everyone lectures tonight. Have you got something you'd like to debate?
I was just trying to be helpful.
She is well aware. She's already been told where it is. Councillor Spagnola.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, this may come as a surprise to you, but I'm actually an avid fan of the Friday update. And I read that religiously.
It's my pleasure.
No, honestly,
Councillor
I really
Spagnola.
enjoy it. And I enjoy it because it actually keeps me up to date. I can see the number of approvals that we put through. I get some of the JDAP updates from time to time. I find out what your movements are all about, Mr Mayor, and that's fantastic. And I think all that's being sought here is a small synopsis of, of the...
Councillors.
Getting late. A small synopsis of basically what is happening in certain areas, whether it's Mindarie, whether it's Tamala Park, or whether it's JDAP. I think it's great. Look, there's nothing worse than being with a group of people who know that you're on the City of Stirling Council and they know more about what's happening at the City of Stirling than you do, because they access some of these areas that have been referred to this evening. I don't think it's unreasonable to either seek a link or indeed to have a situation where there is a small summary. Mindari has, done this or done that. Tamala Park, we've sold 50 blocks, or whatever, vice versa. So I think that's the sort of thing that would be very helpful to me as an elected member, because it would update me, because I'm not involved in any of those committees, and I'd get a chance to find out what's happening. I wouldn't want every little bit there. I would just want some of the salient points that, I probably would need to know in my role as an elected member.
Thank you. And I have no other indications, I don't think. Councillor Caddy?
Just a quick question. When the officers proposed an alternative recommendation for this, there was concern raised about the amount of resourcing that this would be required. I note Councillor Farrelly has now changed the scope of this. I would just want to ask, what's the impact of this on resources? Because, given the information is already available, I don't want to have to take an awful lot more resources, but if it's relatively straightforward and simple to do, then that's a different story.
Sure. Mr Blanchard?
Thank you, through you, Mr Mayor. The significant concern about resource impacts was in relation to state government bodies that may have an impact on the City of Stirling, because there were potentially around 300 of those. In relation to these 4 groups, I'm confident that we can manage this through existing resources, although it will have an impact on the resource of our elected member services team. We'll work through that.
Councillor? In that case, I will go to Councillor Farrelly to close debate.
Look, my concern, through you, Chair, is that this has become a huge, big issue when what I really have asked is the notification of when the minutes have turned up on the sites, so that I am then aware of what was actioned, what was discussed, and rather than going in and out of and look, I do have difficulty at times working out where these different sites are. But on the Friday update, as Councillor Spagnello said, I also read it diligently. At the bottom of that, to have had a little link to say minutes of Mindari Regional Council available, click, you're into it. It might be the website, it doesn't matter. It actually, though, it's a prompt for people like myself who do not have a connection to those councillors attending on those particular areas, and I can then keep up to date with what's going on as a councillor, equal to every single one of you who sits on one of these groups. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that closed debate, move Councillor Farrelly, seconded Councillor Rio. I will now put that motion. And that, surprisingly, is unanimous. Thanks, councillors. We'll now go to item 14.2. Notice of motion, Councillor Carlo Perkoff, Community Hub in Hammersley.
Barely wait. Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. I just have to move this, and then secondly, when we talk about it as well.
No, I want you to move it. I want you to move a motion.
Now there is a motion there, Mr Mayor, and
which one?
Just tell us which motion. I don't want the story.
On page 313, recommend, but there's also an alt on 316.
Yeah. So councillors, let me do this. Which one?
Oh, let's go for the alt rec on page 316,
Thank
please,
you.
Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Okay. Is there a seconder for this motion? Councillor Caddy. Is there anyone opposed? If not, sit down, councillor. We will put that. Thank you.
I wanted to talk a little bit about. Yes, please.
I've put it. Well done, Councillor Perkoff. Nailed it. 14.3. Notice of motion, Councillor David Boothman, Advertising and Social Media Policy Review. Obviously, Councillor Boothman is not here, but he has asked that Councillor Sargent can move this on his behalf. So, Councillor Sargent, let's see if you do this a little bit smoother.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, I am moving what Councillor Boothman has asked me to move tonight, and which is the alternative recommendation with a number 3. And I'll read the number 3 with your indulgence, Mr Mayor.
Sure.
That the City investigate development of an app for devices for residents and ratepayers to access the city's website for general information and reporting matters, with the report presented to Council by May 2021 to inform considerations of funds to be listed in the draft.
Second,
budget.
Second, Councillor Migdale. Is anyone opposed? Quick question.
Does it have to be on 2? The council receives a binary update via the elected members portal. I thought we were having it to council. The number 2. So
Yeah,
number 2, it says elected
Can we-
member
sorry,
portal.
yeah.
Why aren't we council? Because
What? Identifying. It's just an update. There's no reason for it to come to council for a decision. So that's a motion.
I mean, I thought if it's going to identify expenditure costing effective, wouldn't it be going back to council for council to look at the costing and whether it's good or not going back just to the portal? Isn't that the whole idea?
No.
To actually say, have we got valid costings, etc.?
No, I think there's other reporting measures for that. This was just about receiving an update on the cost effectiveness and reach, just more information around the social media. Certainly, if councillors received these updates and then thought there was something that needed a council motion or decision or change, then that could come through a notice of motion. But I don't, yeah. There's no one opposed, then I will put that motion. That is unanimous. Thanks, councillors. Item 14.4, notice of motion from Councillor Joe Ferranti, the Startup Tech Hub in every suburb. And your motion, Councillor Ferranti?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to move the alternative recommendation on page 328 with the amendment to number 3, please.
The amendment?
I'd like to strike that from the list, if I can, please. The reason, I have a reason.
Sure. Yep.
Mr Mayor, the zeitgeist of the ratepayer has changed, and $50,000 is a tremendous amount of money that ratepayers believe for a report. And look, and I appreciate the officers are here for, they have a lot on their plate as it is, but I was hoping this might be able to be incorporated in the economic and tourism redevelopment strategy policy that's being developed, and it amalgamates in there or morphs into there as something that could be suggested in regards to future development.
Thanks. Yep. So that's already been seconded, Councillor Sandri, with the word of the night. Is there anyone opposed or got questions about the words he used? If I will put that. Thanks, Councillor. We're just waiting for Councillor Spagnolo. He's packing up. Let's finish the agenda before you pack up. Good, that's unanimous. Thanks, councillors. Item 15 is a notice of motion for consideration at the next meeting. Councillors, are there any notice of motions? Councillor Lagan.
I'm going to put a notice of motion that a report be presented to full council outlining possible options for the provision of payment of superannuation for the mayor and elected members, and that the report update recent superannuation provisions as per other councils within Australia.
Thank you. Is there any other notice of motions? If Councillor Farrelly. I don't know. Yep, there it is.
Okay. Look, it's just a very short one. It's in regard to beach mats, that one be installed along the beach path near Seabreeze Cafe at Brighton Beach to aid beachgoers with easier access to the ocean. This has become...
Thank you. We don't need a debate. That's fine. Yep, that's the notice of motion. Are there any other notice of motions? No. Item 16, questions by members of which due notice has been given. I have nil. Item 17 has been dealt with previously as we brought it forward. Item 18 is matters behind closed doors. I have nil. That brings us to item 19, which is closure. And I now declare the meeting closed at 9:57 p.m. Thank you, everyone. And good night to the viewers at home. Yeah.